Chapter 86. 3. Dark Sovereign Snake. Unfortunately for you, that is just wishful thinking on your part. Mu Lai's eyes narrowed up. According to ancient texts, massive body forms depict weakness, and seeing that your image is still so light and faint, I think you are not any kind of spirit beast, but have just inherited a bit of the shape and form of some spirit beast, with someone controlling you from behind the scenes. And that is how you possess such power, and is capable of human speech. The sovereign of all snakes lives by absorbing human blood, and reproduces at an alarming rate at night. Moreover, their blood harbors lethal poison, which can corrode all living things. You are the king of all snakes, and you are manipulating all the rest to invade this flesh body, and after they have completely taken over it, you will then possess a human body for yourself. Mu Lai's words had not only caused the men from the assassination temple to be highly shocked, but it had also made the massive snake head widen its eyes as it stared at her, its expression looking rather startled. A pity this human flesh body's willpower is too powerful, and you still have not managed to succeed in conquering it even after wearing it down for several months. Mu Lai lifted up the ends of her lips chillingly. Ranked second in snake black magic, the dark sovereign snake. I wonder if what I say is correct. The enormous snake had narrowed its eyes and flicked its forked tongue out. I can see that the little doll is not all that ordinary. To think that you know about my origins. Hiss. But all of you are destined to die here today. Upon saying that, it had already made the body it had occupied initiate an attack, sending out tens of flying snake shadows with a lift of his hand. Everyone immediately dodged in a flash, where the snake shadows then fell into a pool of water, instantly turning the water in the pool an inky black. Sis, what do we do? Are we really going to leave our lives behind here today? Mu Chi said a little mournfully. It's all my fault. If I had not gone to seek your help to save this person, you would not have been dragged into this. Now things have come to this. No need to mention saving anyone. We can only pray for someone to save us now. Mu Lai's soft whip whizzed through the air at amazing speed, and she said as she dispersed those snake shadows. I have only come across such snake black magic in the medical texts within the Mu family's library, and it did not mention in detail on how to break the spell, so I will only be able to suppress this and not uproot it completely. Then aren't we all finished then? Mu Chi's face looked like it was going to cry, almost filled with despair. A moment's distraction almost caused him to be struck by those snake shadows, which frightened him into focusing his attention on the situation at hand, and not dare to be distracted anymore. The men from the assassination temple were feeling rather guilty that they had dragged the two people into this, and hence they did everything they could to shield the siblings, thinking to let them retreat. This was after all something that had gone beyond anything they could have expected, and there was no need for them to offend an elixir cultivator family on top of that. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Young Miss Mu, we have been thoughtless this time, and have implicated both of you into this. We are very thankful that you were able to come forth to lend us your assistance, but you should go ahead leave here. Feng Qi came in close to say. Mu Lai shook her head with her brows creased up. I can see that the dark sovereign snake has its murderous intent elicited, and would not let me off so easily anymore. If I am to leave now, not only would all of you be killed, but it would be so excited by the slaughter it would have carried out here, that it would go running on a rampage of massacre out there. The imperial capital is not that far away from here, and it would cause the people great alarm. Then what should we do? Is the assassination temple going to disappear from the face of these lands henceforth? Feng Qi said with a saddened sigh. Mu Lai's gaze darkened, and she then muttered in a low voice. If I am able to find that friend of mine, maybe. There is still hope for us. She knows a lot about black magic and curses, and is above me in terms of knowledge and medicine. Feng Qi dodged the shadowy snake attack, and struggled to answer. Is that really true? Where is this friend of yours now? Chapter 87. 1. I came to get reinforcements when that was brought up. Mu Lai seemed to become a little depressed and was slightly angry. I do not know where my friend is, and besides a name, I know nothing else. Feng Qi was at a loss for words. Young Miss Mu, are you serious? After filling my heart with such great delight thinking that we will soon be saved, You are now actually telling me that you do not know where this friend of yours is. This must be how it feels when one goes from being up in the heavens and falls into hell. Wuxia, who was not far away from them, also choked upon hearing her reply. Was his sister kidding here? It must be said it would be a rather lame joke if she was. And it really wasn't that appropriate a moment for jokes, was it? They were all here right before the jaws of life and death. And can you not crack jokes at a time like this to try to liven up the atmosphere? Seeing their faces all filled with pure and utter despair, like she had just committed the most unpardonable crime, Mulai's temple twitched, and she said through tightly clenched teeth, I really only know just the name. She is called Qingyu, and throughout the entire lands, besides that god of slaughter in the Water Edge Kingdom, who is surnamed Qing, no one else has that surname. Maybe she had even lied about her name. Wuxia was a little further away, and had not heard that very clearly, but faintly heard Qing something being mentioned. He then subconsciously asked, What's the name again? She's called Qingyu. In the tranquil abode, Qingbei had just come to comprehend a new realm in the lightning summoning palm. He was feeling highly happy, and was in exceptionally high spirits. So even when it was already very late, he did not feel the slightest bit of lethargy. Just as he was going to tell Qingyu the good news, his ears moved slightly when he heard the sound of movements that were rushing towards them. It was probably due to the advancement in his cultivation that his hearing had become more sensitive than before. The handsome eyes narrowed. It was already so late. Could it be that that woman Mohan Yen still has not given up on getting rid of them, and she had sent assassins to come kill them? His hands were just itching, and he had nowhere to vent. The door of the room further and rattled as it was opened. Qingbei was taken aback a moment. Sis, you have not gone to sleep yet. The white clothes on the young lady was neat and tidy, without a single crease in them. Her eyes were clear, without the slightest hint of grogginess, like a person who had just woken up. With them kicking up such a great din, it's hard for me to not wake up. Qingyu said darkly. She was already about to go to sleep, but had then sensed the irregular movements before she gave up on that idea, wanting to see what sort of demons and monsters were creeping in. Qingbei was a little surprised when he heard that. He had only sensed those faint movements because his cultivation had advanced so very quickly, and here she was saying, kicking up such a great din? Looks like the disparity between them is still very great. Qingbei lamented to himself with a sigh, seeing that the people who were seeking to barge into the tranquil abode had already come into the courtyard, and were already right behind the door. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow, and the points of 3 golden needles glinted sharply and chillingly in the dark room. But the strange thing was, the person was suddenly standing outside the door, and did not move. It was a good while before the person stretched out a hand and knocked on the door. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu exchanged a glance with the equally puzzled Qingbei. What kind of a situation is this? A change in tact? Courtesy before using force? Based on the rule that I do not move when the enemy remains still, the person outside the door did not move, and the siblings naturally remained still as well. But in the very next second, the person outside actually stuck his hand onto the door and pushed experimentally on the door to open it. At that same moment, the gold needles on Qingyu's fingertips shot out. The person outside the door was in fact Wuxia, whom the men in the assassination temple had fought valiantly to shield and protect to allow him to escape. When he heard the 2 words Qingyu that Mulai had said with her own mouth, he had thought that he must have heard wrongly. The demoness and Qingyu were 2 completely different kinds of people, and were worlds apart from each other. How could they possibly come to know each other? And it was said they on rather good terms. Chapter 87. 2. I came to get reinforcements, but when Mulai started to describe that the person was a highly alluring young lady, who looked devilishly handsome when disguised as a young male youth, Wuxia immediately thought of that person, that one young lady who had moved his heart. He could still remember that awkward and slightly embarrassed expression she had back on the night he had uncovered her disguise. Now that he had come here again, Wuxia was feeling rather conflicted in his heart. But he did not have time to think much about it, as the sound of air being torn through coming straight towards his face made him subconsciously feel danger. causing him to leap at lightning speed to dodge to one side. However, the speed of the golden needle was just too fast, and one of them scratched his cheek, causing a drop of blood to flow out. "It's you." Upon seeing who the person was, Qingbei's eyes widened in surprise. "Isn't this the man who came here to the tranquil abode previously to confess his feelings to Qingyu? And it seems like he is also the dethroned sixth prince? What is he doing coming to the tranquil abode at this time of the night? And doing it so sneakily at that?" Qingyu was also startled for a moment, looking like she had never once ever thought that the intruder was not an assassin, but Mu Qi, whom she had pranked once before. And she immediately reacted. "Are you all right?" Her needles were coated with poison, and she hoped that he had not been struck by them. Mu Qi shook his head. "It's just a scratch. I'm fine." Qingyu tossed him a little porcelain bottle. "Take the antidote just in case anyway. Although the wound is tiny, the potency of my poisons are not." "Thanks," Mu Qi said as he pulled out the bottle's stopper with his teeth, poured out the pill inside and took it. The discomfort that was just surging up them then faded away by quite a bit. Qingyu lifted up her phoenix-like eyes that were shining with interest as she looked at the rather wretched-looking young man measuring him up. "What happened to you? Did you get into a fight?" The young man smiled bitterly. "It wasn't a fight. It was a bashing. To think such a thing can happen." Qingyu crossed her arms and said in a calm and unruffled manner, "And you came to my tranquil abode in the middle of the night seeking refuge?" The first time they had met, this fellow was being pursued by killers and his body succumbed to poison, coming to fall among her herb beds. "No, Qingyu. I came here to ask for your help to go save people. We are running out of time. Can I fill you in on the details along the way?" Mu Qi said, his expression looking rather flustered as he spoke. Although the villa in the capital's suburbs was not that far away from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, he had still taken a good amount of time to get here. And that was after he had executed the light steps skill, to shorten the time by quite a bit. "Save people?" Qingyu was taken aback. "Now. Yes, now. Time waits for no man. Every moment wasted here will put them all in increasing danger." The young man, who always had a mischievous smile on his face and rebelled against conformity, had a stern and serious face at that moment. "They are fighting someone who is afflicted with the dark sovereign snake curse, ranked second in snake black magic. His body has been overtaken to the point that his mind is no longer clear, and he currently on a rampage of slaughter. My elder sister said that only you are able to dispel this snake black magic, and I only barely managed to escape being shielded by all of them. If you do not go save them now, any delay will cost them a few more lives." Lives were at stake. Qingyu retracted her smile. "Give me just one moment." Seeing her dig through a whole pile of bottles and flasks, Qingbei pressed his lips tightly together and asked in a soft voice, "Do you need me to help? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, no need for that. Little Bei, you just remain here in the manor. In case anything unexpected happens, I do not want you to get hurt," Qingyu said without even raising her head, before she then quickly stood up and went walking outside. "Please be careful." Seeing that, Qingbei did not continue to insist, but just called out to her in reminder. "Don't worry, I will be fine." Qingyu gave him a reassuring smile, and then leapt out over the back door of the side courtyard. At that moment, within the villa in the capital's suburbs, the entire place was in complete disarray. Chapter 87. 3. I came to get reinforcements because the shadowy snakes the dark sovereign snake shot out were highly corrosive. Everyone was forced into a passive situation, constantly dodging. Moreover, that was the body of their comrade, and before they have ascertained that he could no longer be saved, they could not make themselves harm him in any way. "Chief, wake up. Do not allow the monster to control you anymore." A good-looking youth dodged to the side, and a shadowy snake brushed his clothes. The cloth immediately rotted away a little bit more, and it would have hurt the flesh underneath. His body subconsciously broke into a bout of cold sweat. He just had a close brush with death, and just managed to escape by a hair's breadth. Looking at the hideous-looking man whose face no longer showed any humanity, the young man's face grew red-rimmed. To think that the man who was so powerful and had always fought shoulder to shoulder with them all in the past, would finally fall into such a state now. Why must fate be so cruel to him? Ajahn, have you really given up already? Didn't you say that you will make the carefree valley take the top position among the three great sects one day? Didn't you say that as long as you still live, the assassination temple will forever exist? Are you going to admit defeat? The burly and muscular man with coarse hard looks swung a punch towards the massive leading snakehead. The explosive force caught the snakehead completely off guard, and its vision and mind blurred for a minute. At that same moment, the body of the man with the red-rimmed eyes quivered, and his mind was restored to clarity for a moment. He saw that every single one of his brothers were all in such a wretched shape, all of them carrying significant injuries, the expression of their faces in agony. The leading snakehead was currently in another bout of frenzy, as it battled for control of the body. The thousands of tiny snakeheads weaving and swaying vigorously as they struggled, like two separate consciousnesses, were locked in a tumultuous fight, both seeking to gain the upper hand. Arg, kill me. Just kill me. The man's tall and slender frame suddenly fell down into a kneel, his hands clasped around his head in a pitiful and mournful wail, as blood tears fell from inside his eyes. A hopeless and terrifying sight. Kill me. Kill me now. Ajahn, don't think you can be rid of me. Such a great shell of a body will finally become mine. The snakehead said in haughty arrogance, as it broke into a series of maniacal laughter. Mulai gripped the soft whip in her hand tightly, and her eyes darkened. It's too late. Looking at the situation, even if Wuxia manages to find the person, it is feared that the man would not survive. Seeing the man in such torment and agony, a sense of hopelessness rose up in Mulai's heart for the first time. She was an elixir cultivator, but she was not able to do anything to save this man, who was suffering such torturous pain in front of her. After another bout of agonized and rage-filled roars, while still under the control of the leading snakehead, the man suddenly raised up the sword gripped in his hand, and he viciously stabbed it straight towards his own heart, which stunned everyone at the scene. Ajahn, stop it. Damn you, human. You dared to seek your own death. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Among the raging roars between the leading snakehead and everyone else from the assassination temple, the faint sound of a soft tinkle rang out almost unnoticeably. The sword in the man's hand was struck and sent flying out of his hand, and the leading snakehead let out a loud and deafening roar, as the thick cluster of tiny snakeheads let out a series of agonized hissing. The sound of light footsteps then sounded inside the villa. Everyone turned around to look, and they all saw a young lady in a pure and untainted white dress, who seemed like she was treading upon the silver-white light of the moon on the ground, her exquisite and alluring countenance fair and mesmerizing as it reflected the moon's rays, a slight smile hanging from the edge of her lips, her demeanor so leisurely she could very well have been taking a stroll in her own courtyard at home. And with the approach of the young lady, the massive lead snakehead suddenly cried out in pain, and the tiny multitude of snakeheads started to shrivel and fade away, at a speed that was highly alarming to everyone. The young lady arched up an eyebrow. Why are you running away for? Chapter 88. 1. He's not human. It was so clear to see that it was such a pure and harmless smile, but what that massive and malevolent-looking lead snakehead saw was a smile that was as terrifying as hell. This human young lady? Just who is she really? How could she possibly possess such a powerful and oppressive aura? From the moment that she appeared, the lead snakehead started to feel a kind of fear that burned from deep within its soul, making it feel so frightened that it immediately wanted to seek to flee and scatter. But at that moment, it was as if it was trapped within that shell of flesh, and no matter how hard it tried to struggle, it was still unable to escape. With the unbelievably fearful roars and the helpless struggling from the lead snakehead, the other smaller snakeheads were all also hissing incessantly in terror. And the moment the young lady appeared, a series of events that happened caused everyone to be stunned in their spots. She looked to be merely only slightly over 10 years of age, so frail and weak-looking. But that extraordinary air she commanded was impossible to disregard, a kind of nobility and power that she seemed to be born with. that every single one of them just unconsciously accepted and became irrecoverably convinced to believe. The young lady in her white dress slowly came in closer to the monster of a man who was covered with countless snake heads. The enormous lead snake heads, almost ephemeral bronze bell-sized eyes widening as it stared at her. The tinier snake heads below were so terrified they all drooped down, not moving an inch, except for a slight timid trembling, almost a little adorable to look at. Xingyu did not find it funny, and said inwardly within in an emotionless voice, "Enough, little burrow. Stop fooling around. It's almost frightened to death by you already. That's a little too shameless. With the oppressive aura of a divine artifact of the lost ancients like yours, how can an insignificant shrimp like this possibly withstand it? Aren't you bullying the weak here?" Zhang Mai sneered in contempt. Okay. Who's trying to scare them? So timid and they dare to come out and commit such a deed. This is just the low-level lands after all. If it had gone to the high-leveled lands where divine beasts above the 10th grade roam all over the place, it would be crushed in a second without even a speck of it left behind. Xingyu would naturally not have the ability to cause the lead snake head to be so helplessly frightened, and the key to that was the fella inside her body instead. Although it was a weapon spirit, the amazing thing was that Zhang Mai was an extremely rare divine beast weapon spirit. Its original form was an enormous golden rhino python, of an absolute emperor grade among beast types, and he had come to encounter a similar species today. So in terms of grading alone, he already overwhelmingly quashed the dark sovereign snake. This person is a little strange, Zhang Mai said suddenly in surprise. What is it? Xingyu asked as she turned to look. At that moment, the man was probably had his spirit energy completely depleted and had fainted, but looking at the features on his countenance, his flesh features did not look too bad. But is there something wrong? He's not human. The golden-haired youth spat out those words with clear certainty. Xingyu was a little confused and could not react to it for a moment. What did he mean by not human? Mistress, do you know why that thing wants to take over his flesh body? Zhang Mai said as he clicked his tongue a couple of times, like he had just discovered something interesting. Inside this man, half of his blood's lineage is of the snake tribe, and the bloodline is of a rather high grade. This is why he has drawn this thing in, and I think it has coveted this flesh body for a long time, but had not succeeded all this time because the power of the man's bloodline was too strong. It must have been in a situation when the man was in a very weak and frail state, that it was able to take advantage of the lapse. Bloodline of the snake tribe? Xingyu was a little surprised. Then is he and Little Yi. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Since the beginning of time, the wolf tribe and the snake tribe had always been mortal enemies. So should she save this person? Mistress, when this man's bloodline fully awakens in future, his ability will not be below that of that kid, Qing Yi Li's. He might come to be of use to you. Zhang Mai then opened his mouth to suggest. Chapter 88. 2. He's not human. I didn't think so much into it. Saving a life accumulates more good karma than erecting a 7-story pagoda anyway. Xingyu muttered helplessly, and then crouched herself down. The ephemeral shadowy lead snake head had probably been so terrorized by Little Burrow's oppressive aura that it had lost all ability to defend itself, that it gave up on struggling any further, and it was merely just waiting for death to come. It knows its own situation at least. Xingyu curled up her lips, and a ball of golden red flame suddenly burned in her palm. She then formed a claw with her fingers, and she clasped it over the man's spirit heaven lid, right on the top of his head. The men from the assassination temple on the sides went pale with shock. Before they could even react, they saw the young lady retract her palm, and her other hand quickly taking out a small transparent porcelain bottle. She hit the mouth of the bottle once, and then immediately stoppered it. The series of actions had all happened within a very short period of 2 breaths' time. Everyone then turned to look at the bottle in the young lady's palm, and saw a tiny ball of golden red flame inside swirling incessantly around a pitch-black creature that was long and thin like an earthworm. And upon the man lying on the floor, all the countless densely packed snake heads had already disappeared without a trace, without any of them noticing it at all. Besides the blood covering his body all over, he had finally come to look like a human once again. Qingyu raised an eyebrow and looked at the speechless and flabbergasted men, who looked like their souls had departed from their bodies, before she said with a light laugh, "His body is all right now. You can take him away and clean him up. Let him soak in a bath with this as well." Upon saying that, she then tossed the bottle containing the little earthworm in her hand to Feng Qi standing right at the front. He caught it instinctively and then stared at the writhing creature which had turned all red from being burnt before he asked, "What is this?" Qingyu could not help but smile. The dark sovereign snake's original form. Snake voodoo. Hearing that, Feng Qi almost threw the bottle right out from his hands in shock, and he turned his wide-eyed gaze to stare at her. Soak in a bath. With this? You have not heard me wrongly. Soak it in his bathwater. I have already refined it with elixir fire, and it is now a form of medicine, which will now absorb the remaining toxins out of his body. It will become useless thereafter, and it can be gotten rid of after that. Qingyu went on to explain. Thank you, miss, for lending a helping hand. I wonder who the young miss is. Feng Qi had not even finished asking when the sound of a flurry of hurried footsteps reached them. Mu Qi came running and panting heavily. How is it? It was only after he came in that he discovered that the man who had looked like a monster had reverted to his original state, and the atmosphere was unbelievably quiet. All settled. Qingyu looked at him, gasping heavily for breath, and her phoenix-like eyes raised slightly. I asked you to come with me, but you refused. Are you tired? How would I know if you really meant it? Mu Qi lamented with a mournful face. Earlier, when she was coming out from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, after Qingyu ascertained the location, she had asked in suggestion that she could bring him along to pass through dimensional space, which would save him quite a bit of time. Mu Qi had instead given her a "You've got to be kidding" look, indicating he did not believe a word of it. The skill of passing through dimensional space was something that only people from the high-level lands were capable of, and a very rare few in the middle-level lands possessed that ability. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. And unexpectedly, she had actually just disappeared from right before his eyes. Mu Qi then felt that from the moment he came to know her, he had been constantly witnessing amazing things. Divine skills in medicine, mysterious and unfathomable methods employed, high-level skill like passing through dimensional space, and he does not know how many more secrets there were. She's an absolute freak. Hearing the grouse-filled tone in his voice, Qingyu looked at him without any expression on her face. I never make such superfluous statements. Mu Qi immediately wanted to vomit blood in that instant. She's so unbelievably self-assured. Chapter 88. 3. He's not human. Could you be the friend that young Miss Mu mentioned about? The elixir cultivator with exquisite skills in medicine? When Feng Qi saw Mu Qi come in following right behind, and the two of them were acting like they were familiar with each other, he was able to immediately guess the other party's identity. That's right. That's her. Another cold and emotionless female voice rang out. That was when Qingyu then noticed the person in black battle clothes, a tall and slender-figured lady. She had been standing with her body slanted sideways, and now that she had turned her body, her face could now be seen fully. That face wouldn't be considered to be all that outstanding, and could even be termed as ordinary-looking, inconspicuous when placed among a crowd. But she was born with a pair of extremely beautiful eyes that rippled with autumn waters, sparkling and enchanting, which only lent an added outstanding quality to her otherwise rather plain countenance. Demeanor cold and distant, who looked highly arrogant, hard for people to get close to. But it was that haughty air and demeanor that made Qingyu remember who that person was. Her haughtiness was different from Yin Ning Luo's cold indifference that made her seem like she did not even consume mortal food. But it was as if this lady had been born just like that, so proud and aloof that she could not bother herself with anyone at all, like no one was even worth her paying them any notice. Hence that unlikable personality caused her to have bad affinity with people, where she could not claim to have any friends that she could even talk to at all. But people with this kind of personality were also highly extreme. Either they viewed everything with nothing but contempt, but when they cared about a particular person, they would dig down deep into their hearts and offer everything they had to the person, regardless of what it would cost them. They would do it with no regrets. Because for people with such a personality, a close friend was hard to come by, and anyone that they came to care about was extremely rare to them as well. She had said that she did not have any friends, but for Qingyu, this was the only friend she recognized as her own. Qingyu remembered that it was roughly about 4 years ago, when she was still cracking her head on how she was going to treat little Bei's legs. The polar core fire was something once could chance upon, but never to seek. She had almost scourged through all the most terrifying and dangerous places throughout the lands, and it was one of those times that she encountered a bunch of people being attacked by a rarely seen 7th grade spirit beast. She was only 10 years old then, and the oldest one among that bunch was about 18. She still remembered how the bunch of people had wanted to draw the attention of the 7th grade spirit beast away for them to escape, and they had dumped a little young girl there. She had initially not wanted to stick her nose into other people's business, but when she saw how weak and frail that little young girl was, but her eyes burned with an indescribably vicious bloodthirstiness, even when the spirit beast was 100 times larger in size. She did not stop fighting the beast despite the fact her body was all covered with wounds that were bleeding freely. Upon seeing that she was finally about to be completely drained out and devoured by the beast, and Qingyu had thought that the little girl had given up on struggling, the little girl then used every last ounce of strength in her body as she tensed up, driving the dagger hidden in her sleeve down in a vicious thrust that stabbed the massive beast blind. That completely infuriated the enormous beast, and its sharp claws reached out, about to tear her to shreds. It was right in that instant that Qingyu was moved by the little girl, where she moved to rescue the little girl from under the massive beast's claws. She shot the golden needles coated with lethal poison she carried on her into the beast's body, and its gargantuan body then suddenly crashed to the ground, killed by poison. Qingyu bandaged the little girl's wounds, and all throughout that, the little girl's clear and cold eyes did not leave Qingyu at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yushi then said, "Those people are my siblings from the family clan I grew up in. When I tried my best to protect them, they all then turned around and used me as prey, abandoning me completely. Besides my father, no one has ever treated me as nicely as you have. From now onwards, you are a friend of Mulai's, my one and only friend." One and only friend. Qingyu was taken aback by the serious tone of the little girl's voice a moment before her mouth then split into a smile. "I am highly honored. My name is Qingyu." Chapter 89. 1. Incredible secret. She still remembered that it was at a spirit beast's lair in the northern part of the constellation lands. Since the beginning of time, divine Lingji herbs was always closely guarded by a spirit beast, and Qingyu had also gone there to try her luck as well. After she saved Mulai, they had spent about half a month's time with each other. But due to some strange series of events, they encountered a beast stampede. It was not known what kind of a terrifyingly enormous creature could have caused the many thousands of beasts to become so agitated, which then kicked up a powerful sandstorm. Qingyu was caught off guard for a moment, and was immediately pulled into it. By the time she landed, she suddenly found herself in the White Finland's border, where she then came across Lu Junyao and his gang, and she successfully seized from their hands a high-vintage polar fire core that was filled with robust spirit power. For many years after that, Qingyu did not meet the little girl again. After all, besides her name, she knew nothing else about the girl, as she was highly focused only on her cultivation and did not pay much attention to worldly affairs. She was not aware that after Mulai escaped from calamity, Mulai sent people to search for her in that place for 3 whole months. When no news resulted from the search, Mulai was depressed for a long while, and she became even more cold and aloof. Now that they saw each other again, with the changes over 4 whole years, the puerile countenances of the two people had blossomed, far different from the way they had looked when they were younger. But there were certain people that you do not need to judge by the way they looked, as the extraordinary flair and incomparable grace they carried just drew people's gazes upon them unconsciously. There was no doubt that both Qingyu and Mu Lai belonged to such a group of people, ones who possessed that special and unique flair. The first time they met, the little girl's dressing had been highly unsuited for one at her age, so dark and somber in all black, making her highly unapproachable. But Qingyu knew that the little girl had an extremely soft heart. Qingyu then blinked her eyes and said in a soft and gentle voice, "Lai Lai, it's been a long time." The body of the cold and indifferent girl in black clothes suddenly stiffened a moment, and the ears hidden beneath her hair reddened almost unnoticeably. That affectionate term used to address her. That was the name she was called by, Lai Lai. Even her father had not called her by such an affectionate name. From that year that they lost contact, no matter how long had passed, she firmly believed that the person was still alive, but was just in a place that she did not know about. Although so many years had passed, she had never once forgotten that such a person existed. The one whom, even when she was abandoned by kin from her own clan, had rescued her from right under the sharp claws of that spirit beast. The one who had bandaged her wounds. The one who had stayed together with her in that dangerous and pitch-dark lair of the spirit beast. The one whose back was shown to her unguardedly. And when food was found to ease their hunger, she was the one who ate first. The one who took care of her when she was wounded. The one who kept watch while she slept. It had been clear that that person was a little girl younger than she was, but had moved her heart completely, to care for someone so much, and to like so much. And at that moment, that one person was right before her eyes, smiling at her. Mu Qi was sensing the strange atmosphere in that scene, seeing that the expression on his older sister's face did not feel right. Just as he was suspecting that some dispute because of love or hatred had happened between them before, he suddenly saw Mu Lai's body move, to take a few steps forward, before she stretched her hands out and grabbed Qingyu in a big hug. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Qi's jaw almost dropped. She hugged her. Mu Lai was very tall, the kind that could gaze over all the heads of others among females. So when she embraced the similarly tall Qingyu in her arms, although she was just about half a head taller, she looked to be clearly taking position of the elder sister in that scene. The two people, one in white and one in black, just stood them locked in an embrace, and it was hard to describe, but it felt like they were kind of well-matched. Chapter 89. 2. Incredible secret. Mu Qi was taken aback by his own shocking thought, and he quickly shook his head to shake off that messed-up thought in his head. Doesn't Qingyu already have someone she likes already? And he had even met him before. It was a very handsome-looking and highly powerful man, so he was certain that there was no problem with Qingyu's sexual orientation. But as for his elder sister, he really did not dare guarantee it. For that strong and dominating woman, where men were weak as chickens in her eyes, she was much more manly than men around her. There was no need to mention the women. To her, they were all just a bunch of frail and weakly white lotuses who plotted and schemed pretentiously against each other to get ahead. She hated those weak and dainty little ladies the most, and if they come to encounter her on a bad day, she would not hesitate to speak with her fists. He had never seen Mu Lai show anyone polite courtesy, needless to mention such intimate action. So, could the person that Mu Lai really likes be Qingyu? The expression on Mu Qi's face was utterly horrified, and he had never thought that he could be so sharp. He seemed to have discovered a very incredible secret. Suddenly being embraced, Qingyu was stunned for a moment as well before she then said softly with a smile, "Have you been well?" The scene felt strangely familiar. Why did her friends seem to like using an embrace to express their delight and excitement in their hearts? Hearing that, Mu Lai released her, and her gaze stared deeply at the young lady, with her exquisite featured countenance. "So, you are a daughter of the Duke of Eternal Peace." No wonder she had not been able to find a single trace, no matter how hard she tried. She would never have thought that the young lady would really be from the Eternal Peace Duke Manor. "I had not thought that the young miss of such a famous elixir cultivator's family would be Lai Lai. You're really very good." Qingyu smiled and said, her eyes two smiling arcs. But after Mu Lai heard that, there was no hint of a smile on her face. Her eyes dimmed as she looked at Qingyu, Famous? Are you mocking me? If I was really so famous, then why have you not come look for me before? You must not care all that much for a friend like this, right? Those words were clearly said in a calm tone, and without any traces of emotion. But Qingyu could still detect a sliver of sadness and aggrievement. Qingyu then sighed slightly. After that time, I was brought to the Whitefin lands, and it took me a good half-year of floundering before I managed to come back. The recovery of my younger brother's legs was also going through a critical stage, and we had to defend against rounds of scheming and assassination plots one after another. I really could not pull myself out of all that at all. About Qingyu's younger brother's condition, back when the two of them just got to know each other, Mu Lai had come to know about it, aware that he was a youth with quite an unfortunate fate in life. So hearing Qingyu mention that, she could not help but ask, how is he now? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, he can already stand up. Back when I came to land in the Whitefin lands, I actually came across a superior grade polar fire core. That kid then received fortuitous luck out of misfortune, where not only were his legs cured, his meridians were cleansed and boosted, to turn into a prodigy from his wrecked and ruined body. Qingyu shook her head as she said with a smile, comforted by the great fortune of that silly little fella back home. Mu Lai raised her head up slowly. That is also sweetness that came only after so much bitter suffering. After saying that, she then remembered something and raised her eyes up to ask, in the selection trials of the sex that are 6 months away, have you made any decisions about that? Qingyu was a little surprised by Mu Lai's question. Both little Bei and I will be going to the Faint Mist sect. What a coincidence. Mu Lai said as she raised an eyebrow. I am also going to the Faint Mist sect, but I am not interested in their selection trials at all. I need the Faint Mist sect's spirit spring water to help me break through to become a golden grade level elixir cultivator. Qingyu nodded her head in understanding and then smiled. Then that means that I will have another companion at that time. Chapter 89. 3. Incredible secret, great, then it's agreed that we'll meet there. Mu Lai said as her gaze deepened. This time, I will not be unable to find you anymore. Qingyu could not help but be speechless and to laugh helplessly. On the side, Mu Qi watched how the two of them were chatting away merrily, and he was already numb from the shock. To think that the haughty and arrogant woman could really have such a gentle side to her. He was almost blinded by this absolutely incredible sight. But there was one thing he was even more certain of. The person Mu Lai liked was definitely Qingyu. The good-looking face was twisted up into a ball. Should he be kind-hearted and go remind Qingyu? She was after all someone he had liked before, and although she did not like him back, but having caught Mu Lai's eye, that was a really very dangerous thing. On the other side, Mu Lai was instead waving for him to go over, her demeanor showing a rare moment of amicability, where even her icy face that would not change in 1,000 years was now showing a faint hint of a smile. Achi! Qingyu is the only friend that I recognize, and she had saved my life before. But how did you two come to know each other? Mu Lai had not forgotten that he had been the one who suggested that he would go find Qingyu. He had never thought that the person she had not been able to find for so many years had just been found by him. But Mu Qi had been in the Limitless sect all this time, and just came out occasionally once in a while. He would always either come back to the Mu family to see his father, or go look for his friends for drinks. So how had he come to know Qingyu? Mu Qi had not yet responded when Qingyu said helplessly with a light laugh, I really have quite a strong affinity with you siblings. He had a bit too much to drink before, and fell into other people's treachery, where he fell in my courtyard gravely poisoned. I saved him, and extorted 1 million in gold out of me. Mu Qi then said, as he cast a mournful glance at her. Hearing that, Mu Lai snorted derisively and her face turned contemptuous. Do you know how high Qingyu's level is as an elixir cultivator? The elixirs she cultivate are of full and complete purity, without the slightest contamination of any impurities. Almost not a single elixir cultivator in these lands is able to achieve such a perfect level of purity at all. Do you that if one of her elixirs is taken out to be sold in the black market, It will be a loss at 1,000,000 in gold? Muchi was speechless. So he has earned from this. But he had only made just one statement. Sis, aren't you being too highly protective here? And look clearly here. This is your younger brother, you are saying that too. Don't you think you are defending the wrong person here? Qingyu could not help but laugh, as she watched the two siblings squabbling with each other. She then looked out at the sky, and saw that it was nearing the dawn as the colors were just about to change. As the people from the assassination temple had been too worried about their comrades' injuries, they had immediately taken Ajahn back to his room upon hearing Qingyu's instructions, cleaning out his wounds, and putting him in the bath to absorb the poison out of him. Mu Lai and the rest spoke for a while out there, and they then went together to check on the man's condition. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Because he had to soak in the water for a good 4 hours. The man was still in the bathtub as the steam rose around him. His eyes were closed and his face had become a little rosy from the comforting heat. After the malevolent and horrifying-looking snake head that had invaded his body was now gone, it could be seen that the man was actually exceptionally good-looking. The exquisite features on his face did not pale in comparison to a woman's, eyes deep-set, his stunning brows extending almost to his temples. The kind of man that captivated people with just one glance. It was not known just how stunning those eyes would be when they were open, but the most attractive part of that face was at the edge just below his left eye, where there was a black floral blossom, barely the size of a fingernail, small and petite. Even though it was so tiny, the layers of its petals could be seen, its shape highly unique, a species that had never been seen before. With that black blossom under his eye, it gave him an added sense of devilish mystery. Chapter 90. 1. Divine-level assassin. People born with extraordinary facial physiognomy usually exemplifies propitious signs in their lives. Like Yen Ning Luo, who was born with a violet abyss bloom on her forehead, was determined that she was destined to live the life of a phoenix, her future deemed to reach unmeasurable heights. They were also some born with fiendish signs, their lives doomed to encounter many calamities, set to bring misfortune upon their closest kin. And this man before their eyes, despite his set of handsome facial countenance, had, because of that black floral bloom below his eye, looked evil and devilish. With all her travels across the lands, the things Mu Lai had seen and heard were naturally more than Qingyu, who did not care about anything that happened in the world around her. When Mu Lai saw that unique bloom on the man's face, the expression on her face was slightly startled, and she then opened her mouth to ask in surprise, could this man possibly be the one right at the top of the assassin's ranking chart, the soul summoner, Shizhan Chen? Once those words came out, the men from the assassin's temple were all taken aback a moment, never thinking that she would actually know Ajah's real identity. Shizhan Chen? He is really Shizhan Chen, the highly powerful pugilist known as the only divine-level assassin throughout the lands. At the back, Mu Qi's face was one of stupefied shock, his tone of voice highly agitated and excited, like he had just seen a famous person he greatly admired, unable to contain the joy bursting out of his heart. That is Shizhan Chen right there. And the mystery surrounding him, and his level of powers were in no way inferior to the Duke of Vast Seas at all. But compared to the overly mysterious Duke of Vast Seas, there were just too many rumors about Shizhan Chen going around. This notorious and infamous divine-level killer of the Assassin Alliance was a target that all assassins highly revered and worshipped. One could count the number of missions Shizhan Chen had taken up after he became famous, with just the fingers on one hand. Based on just the number of times he had taken up missions, one would be able to see just how high a price he commanded. Unless it was an exceptionally difficult mission that no one else was able to undertake, or he would never accept the mission, and he had never once failed. The name Soul Summoner had stemmed from how anyone whom he set his eye on would all die a premature death within 24 hours without exception, and just before their deaths, they would suffer such extreme shock and terror that their souls left their bodies, his ways and methods unfathomable. The most shocking rumor was that he was once contracted by a great entity to assassinate a highly respected and senior-ranked clan elder from the Whitefin Land's 4 great family clans. It was said that the target was a few full levels above him in cultivation, but he had completed that impossible mission without any pressure. The amount of commission paid by the contractor at that time was rumored to be 80 million taels of gold and 100 superior-grade spirit beast core crystals. That kind of remuneration paid had really sent all the assassins into shivers. That was the divine great level indeed, and they could only watch feeling inferior, knowing they would never be able to attain that. I would not have thought that the chief mastermind of the assassination temple is Shi Zhanchen. Mulai was also a little surprised, and she then asked in puzzlement. But he is such a powerful man, how did he? It was impossible to imagine that the man who had looked neither man nor ghost, and had lost his mind to a maniacal rage earlier was this same man here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Fengqi glanced at the man in the bathtub who had his eyes tightly shut, and let out a sigh. We do not know what happened either. Unless Zhan has accepted a mission, otherwise he would not step out of the assassination temple in most circumstances. He had previously shown some occasional signs of dizziness and double vision before, and we had thought that he was merely too tired, never thinking that the situation would become worse and worse to end up like this, to the point that many elixir cultivators did not even dare to treat him. Qingyu asked with a slight smile. I heard that he assassinated a person from the White Finland's 4 great family clans. I wonder if it was from the Nangong family clan? How does the young miss know? It was a matter that was only known internally, and it was a secret to people outside. How did this young lady know that it was someone from the Nangong family clan? Mulai also looked at her in surprise, her eyes seemingly questioning. Chapter 90. 2. Divine-level assassin Qingyu raised an eyebrow, and her gaze dimmed as she said, I went to the White Finlands by accident once before and stayed there for about half a year's time, so I know quite a bit of that place. Among the 4 family clans, only the Nangong family clan are skilled in black magic and voodoo arts, adept in rearing and in cultivating creatures used in curses. Every single one of their people has a voodoo insect implanted in their bodies from birth, and they accompany their host in growth. If their hosts come to meet with a premature death, the voodoo insect would follow the order given by their hosts, just before they die to take revenge upon the culprit who killed the host. After her voice fell, she then paused a moment as her gaze glanced at the black-colored bloom, and said in a meaningful tone, He is rather fortunate in life. He was merely afflicted with snake voodoo, and to him who was of the snake tribe's bloodline, it wouldn't cause him much harm, but just momentary torment, and would not risk his life in any way. After hearing her explanation, the men then came to understand. The gaze of that handsome young youth then darkened, and he said in a cold voice, Those people from the Nangong family clan are really vicious. They made the chief suffer so much torture. The day will come that we will make them pay back in folds. With this matter regarding Zhan, we hope that the few of you will keep in secret. After all, there are many people vying voraciously for his life, and it will be very dangerous for him before he makes a full recovery. Among the men, the burly and towering figure of a man took a step forward to say in a stern voice, Don't worry, none of us here are blabbermouths. Moreover, Mulai's gaze then glanced at the man in the bathtub as he said slowly, Shi Zhanchen is one of the very few people among assassins that I rather admire. Assassins were known to everyone in the world to be people that were heartless and merciless, cruel and bloodthirsty. But Shi Zhanchen was a man of strict principle. He would never strike against the weak elderly, women or children. Using his words, it meant that a killer should never strike the defenseless, as that would only insult the weapon that held in their hands. Dawn was breaking, and the few of them did not tarry much longer. Although the men from the assassination temple tried their best to ask them to stay, that they must wait till Shi Zhanchen regains consciousness to thank them personally, they were still rejected. Just before they parted, Qingyu subconsciously glanced at the blossom, just below Shi Zhanchen's eye, and it was not known whether it was due to a moment of hallucination, but she seemed to feel that the flower that had originally only bloomed halfway had actually blossomed further, looking even more devilishly beautiful. Next day, although she had not slept the entire night, But just meditating for the span of a half day in her dimensional space would wash away all feeling of exhaustion and sleepiness for Qingyu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hence she had woken up just as early as always that day, when the leaves and petals in her herb beds were still covered in morning dew, pristine and crystalline with exceptional beauty, looking highly robust and thriving with vitality. Mo Han Yen had not come out to move about ever since the last incident, and she had probably already given up completely. To avoid all the strange gazes from everyone else, she had seemingly come to a complete rest. But she would most definitely have sent word to Yenning Luo, and added lots of spice in her letter, so that when Qingyu went to the Faint Mist sect, Yenning Luo would surely seek revenge for her mother, which would ensure that Qingyu's life in there would not be dull. The training in the wilderness that Qin Fong had arranged for them was set to happen in the next few days, and when Qingyu recalled back about the place she had gone to survey a few days before, she felt that the mosquito and bug problem there at night was highly important. In order to not let herself be bugged to death and be unable to sleep throughout the night, Qingyu specially made several herb bags that would kill the bugs and mosquitoes, so that she would not have to fear that problem. If all those revered elderly elixir cultivators came to know that she had used her exquisite knowledge in medicine to cultivate mere bug killers, they would surely be snorting till their beards bristled and stare at her angrily, while admonishing her of the ignorant use of knowledge and a complete waste of talent. Chapter 93. Divine Level Assassin. On the other side, Mu Lai had returned to the Mu family, and only dozed for slightly more than 2 hours, when a servant came bright and early in the morning to pass word that the family head wanted her to go to the front hall. After Mu Lai came in rather late, she was stunned for a moment when she saw 2 good quality black sandalwood boxes placed in the front hall, before she asked in bewilderment, "What are they?" The Mu family head, Mu Qing Tian, was seated up upon the main seat with a gentle and refined face. Although he was already about 40 years of age, but that countenance still looked exceptionally young and good-looking. He looked at Mu Lai's surprised expression that was quite rare to see, and could not help but shake his head in laughter. "I was going to ask you, just when did my precious daughter become the Carefree Valley's benefactor?" "Carefree Valley?" Mu Lai arched up an eyebrow, unable to react in that instant. "They were sent here by the Carefree Valley early this morning, and they specifically said that they were thank you gifts for the Mu family's eldest young Mississippi." Mu Qing Tian opened his mouth to say, and then signaled to a servant at the side to open the boxes. Mu Lai's gaze turned to look and saw an entire box of glittering gold pieces, and that the other box was filled with countless beast-type spirit cores. Such shocking generosity! It even astounded Mu Qing Tian. But the Carefree Valley's people had not even waited long enough for him to refuse the gift. The person who delivered the gift had immediately left without giving him any chance to do that. Underserved remuneration without merit. It was like a hot potato in Mu Qing Tian's hands, and he had immediately summoned Mu Lai in for questioning. Mu Lai's eyes glinted, and she then said indifferently, "I merely happened to save someone from the assassination temple, and this is probably the reward they are giving in return." That last Qingyu was used to concealing herself, and if she did not want anyone to find her, no one would be able to find any trace of her. The assassination temple had most probably been unable to locate her, and they had then sent these things here to her instead. Hearing that, Mu Qing Tian's face looked a little concerned. "I see. You must not come to have any close links with these people from the Carefree Valley. To the people out there, they are an unorthodox sect, and our Mu family have always steered clear of people from the sections." "Father, I understand," Mu Lai replied, "but I have been stuck at the elixir cultivator's silver level 8th grade, and that is why I need to make a trip to go to the Faint Mist sect in half a year's time for the sect's selection trials. I intend to fight to break through to the gold level in one go." Mu Qing Tian nodded his head in satisfaction. "It is good that you have such strong resolve. Among the Mu family's younger generation, we are all depending on you. In the Mu family currently, most of the younger juniors possess only average talent. Besides Mu Lai, whom he is highly proud of, none of the young men and ladies from the branches of the family were outstanding, which just made Mu Qingtian unable to help himself, but to sigh at times, fearing that the elixir cultivation family clan would fall into decline with that generation. Towards Mu Qingtian's depressed demeanor, how could Mu Lai possibly not know what he was thinking in his heart? She patted him lightly on the shoulder and said, "Father, rest assured. I will bring the Mu family to glorious new heights together with you. The elixir cultivator family clan will not fall into decline forever." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Qingtian nodded his head, comforted by the words. Here on the other end, after Mu Qi parted ways with Mu Lai, he was preparing himself to return to the Limitless sect, as the sect's recruitment trials would begin in 6 months, where the 3 great sects would recruit a new batch of fresh blood. And in 2 months, it would be the sect's internal contests for its disciples. Every sect would have their top 10 ranks and the top 100 ranking charts. Those who fall out of the top 100 would be demoted to become regular disciples. So whenever this period nears, all those who were not on the charts would be eyeing for a spot covetously, and the ones on the charts would be jittery and nervous, afraid that they would fall off the chart, tirelessly working hard to increase their powers day and night. Before Mu Qi left, he went to see someone. Chapter 91. 1. The truth is just that cruel. You were looking for me? To Mu Qi, Xianyuanche's crown prince residence should be become too familiar to him. Because he was going to leave here tonight, he came over here straight away, after he received word from a foot soldier. The man was dressed in an ivory white brocade robe as he stood, his hands held behind his back, looking different from the normally lofty and unreachable crown prince in the imperial palace. He was in his own residence now and dressed in such simple regular clothes made him a lot more approachable. Xianyuanche immediately saw the young man fall right onto the lounge, like he did not have any bones in his body, and Xianyuanche's eyes glinted slightly before he tossed an exquisitely well-made little urn over. Seeing that, the young man sprung up like a carp in water to catch the urn firmly before bringing under his nose to take a whiff. His good-looking eyes then lit up. Such great wine. This is of at least a 50-year vintage. Where did you get this precious treasure from? Mu Qi was a born alcoholic, and he was clearly only about 17 or 18 years old, but he had already developed a great tolerance for wine, where 1,000 cups would not take him down. It could be seen from here just how many years he had been immersed in drink. It was a gift from a friend many years back, and I have kept it for very long. Xianyuanche said with a gentle voice. Hearing those words, Mu Qi's gaze turned fierce, the expression on his face filling up with anger. That's just great. You hold such great wine, and you did not bring it out to share earlier, but kept it hidden for yourself. You can still call yourself a brother? The young man looked like his feelings had been gravely deceived. Xianyuanche merely glanced at him and then slowly said, "The wine was kept just for you, but when I wanted to bring it out to share, you had already left without a sound. Left without leaving even a single word." Mu Qi was taken aback a moment, and he lowered his eyes to smile to himself without saying a word, as he plucked the wooden stopper off the wine urn. The thick heady fragrance of wine immediately filled up the entire room. This wine is really great," Mu Qi said in high praise before he picked up 2 cups from the table to pour out the wine. "Have a taste." Xianyuanche walked over and sat down, watching the young man down the entire cup like a thirsty cow. His eyes narrowed, and he took a very slight sip. Mu Qi saw his actions, and could not help but burst out laughing. "You are still as self-restrained as ever. But compared to the past where you would refuse even a single drop, you have improved quite a bit. Ah Qi, you know what I want to ask you." Xianyuanche put down his cup and said in a soft voice. Mu Qi shook his head as he poured out another cup for himself. "It's all already in the past. Why are you still worrying about it? I have let it all go." Just as he was about to empty the cup of wine, a large hand held his arm. "You've let go? You've truly let it go completely?" Xianyuanche knew that Mu Qi was just doing what he had always done, refusing to face up to the problem and running away from speaking about it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If you've truly let go, then why are you still so distant towards me? Xian Yuanche said with a curl of his lips, his tone seemingly slightly mocking. Do you know what you were like in the past? You were a person whose feelings were clearly written upon your face, be it joy, anger, sadness, or delight. When you were angry, you would vent it out on me, but now, you seem to have become like all the hypocritical and pretentious people, always showing only a slovenly and indifferent smile on your face. Mu Qi froze a moment before he arched his lips up into a smile. Isn't it good? The person I was in the past was young and brash, always making rash decisions. Back then, what really happened? Xian Yuanche's hands pressing down on his unconsciously tightened. He desperately wanted to know why after he returned from the faint mist sex recruitment trials back then, everything had changed completely. Aqi's mother was the most revered imperial concubine, who was second only to the empress. How did she end up being discovered by people in the palace to have taken her own life in her own bedchambers? Chapter 91. 2. The truth is just that cruel. And why had our imperial father been so heavy-handed with Aqi, who had not even been a full 10 years of age back then? Such a young child, and he was given 50 lashes. The whip was filled with hooked barbs throughout its length, and every single lash from it would hook up slivers of flesh and blood. How had Aqi managed to survive through that? He only remembered that when he returned back to the palace, the bright grisly red trail of blood had stretched from the main hall to reach a very far distance, and the palace servants were wiping up the bloodstains on the floor, which took them a very long period of time. He had been greatly shocked by the scene. He did not know just how much blood Aqi had shed, but the one thing he knew was that all that blood had been from Aqi, the person he cared for the most. He heard from people in the palace that the sixth prince had left immediately after receiving his punishment. The tiny frame had taken each highly laborious step slowly and painfully as he walked towards the doors out from the palace. It was probably due to the gravity of his wounds that he would waver and fall after moving some distance, but would pick himself back up again to carry on. In the end, he was already practically crawling when he went out of the palace. Just hearing that, and he was able to imagine that scene. Just how painful had it been for Aqi? And how was he really feeling in his heart when he was leaving the very place he had grown up in? Just overnight, his mother who loved him so much had died, and even his imperial father had abandoned him. Every time that Xian Yuanche thought about what Mu Qi went through, it was so heartbreaking that he would feel the pain right into his bones. Mu Qi looked at Xian Yuanche's sad and solemn face, his eyes serious. A good while passed before he then brushed off Xian Yuanche's hand on him. He then downed the wine in the cup before he said, "You asked me here just to ask me this? That happened 10 years ago, and why are you still asking about such small old matters that had already gone rotten? Aren't we still good brothers all the same?" "You are lying." Xian Yuanche's gaze turned cold. "You hate me, don't you?" He had not forgotten back when they had seen each other for the last time, how Mu Qi's eyes that were always prone to smiles had been filled with unbridled murder. Although it had been just a passing instant, he had still caught that fleeting look. It was probably because they had spent such a long time with each other, and he cared for Mu Qi greatly. Xian Yuanche still remembered that look in Mu Qi's eyes till this day. But they had once been so very close. Throughout the vast and enormous imperial palace, with so many princes and princesses in there, only the two of them were able to chat with each other amicably, and that was also a kind of affinity between them. This mystery had troubled Xian Yuanche for many years, and it was still a heavy knot in his heart today. "Big brother, there are some things that you does not require you to pursue till you get to the bottom of it," Mu Qi said softly. "It was only because of your invitation that I came to set foot into this place again this time. But there will not be a second exception. Just what could have caused father to fly into such a rage that he would denounce your status as a member of the imperial family? And also about your mother?" "Xian Yuanche, I'm telling you not to ask anymore. Don't you understand? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU." Finally, the young man's face no longer had that lazy and indifferent smile hanging upon it, and his voice had turned chilling as he spoke, his gaze icy as he stared at Xian Yuanche. "Unless you tell it to me." Xian Yuanche furrowed up his brows. and replied with steely resolve. He did not want a barrier to forever remain between them, and did not wish to see Wuxia face him with that fake and perfunctory smile on his face. After a long silence, Wuxia finally stood up from the lounge chair, and his tall, slender frame stood straight as a rod in his spot, the air suddenly turning stifling around him. "What do you want to know?" The young man then leaned in close, his full red lips slightly open. "Why my mother took her own life." Because her scandalous deed had been discovered when the imperial concubine of the kingdom had not been able to endure the loneliness while she was pregnant and had illicit relations with another man, which caused her to miscarry? And in order not to shame Xianyuan Ao, the ruler of the kingdom, besides dragging her own battered and wretched body to end her own life, was there even a better way for her to resolve the problem? Chapter 91. 3. The truth is just that cruel. What did you say? Xianyuan Che's eyes widened incredulously as he fell back a step. How could the imperial concubine, that beautiful and elegant woman, was in such a high position, and she was pregnant with an imperial heir, which was such matter of such high glory? She should have been highly protective of the child in her abdomen. So how could she possibly get herself involved in something so absurd like an illicit affair with another man? There must be something more to it no matter how one looked at it. Seeing him show a look of such utter disbelief, Wuxia then curled up the corners of his lips mockingly. "You asked me why I had my identity as the imperial heir denounced, and was made to suffer punishment. Ha! Of course the brilliant and honorable emperor back then had thought that since my mother dared to do such a abhorrible deed, maybe I am also a bastard child from some other men as well. Despite the fact my highly aged maternal grandfather had knelt outside the main hall to beg for benevolence to have me spared, and he had even refused to prove my lineage through dripping a drop of our blood to see if they joined." When he spoke about that, Wuxia then laughed out loud, his face slowly coming closer. So close that Xianyuan Che was able to clearly see his own reflection in the young man's crystal-clear eyes. The young man's breath coming out through Wuxia's slightly open mouth, lightly brushing over Xianyuan Che's cheek. "I hate you. That's right. There were many times I nearly lost control and wanted to kill you." The young man's eyes were so beautiful it seemed they could almost talk, coming to be tainted with murder in an instant. "All of it had been the work of your mother, that gentle and virtuous empress," Wuxia said, pausing between each and every word, the expression on his face mocking and filled with ridicule. "How hilarious it is that my mother had treated her as close as a sister for so many years, just because the imperial physician deduced that it was another prince in her abdomen, and because everyone else were saying that I am the one who has the ability to vie for the position of becoming the heir against you." Wuxia hated not just the empress, he hated Xianyuan Che, and the person he hated the most was himself. He should not have displayed his own talents, should not have gotten close to Xianyuan Che, and really shouldn't have competed with Xianyuan Che in everything, which then caused the empress to grow wary, which went on to cause his little brother to be cruelly harmed before he could even be born, and brought harm upon the mother whom had loved him so much. "I do not believe that." Xianyuan Che pushed Wuxia away from him harshly. "How could my mother possibly do something like this?" "Ha! It's up to you whether you want to believe or not." Wuxia's lips stiffened. "Why do you think she isn't able to sleep well at night for so many years and turned to Buddhism, becoming a staunch vegetarian? That is because she had cruelly taken the lives of two people. The first one my mother's, the second being my little brother, who did not have the affinity to come into this world, whose aggrieved spirits have been haunting your mother to return them their lives. Although the Mu family is a family clan of elixir cultivators, but back in the day, my mother not only possessed outstanding skills in medicine, she was also a spirit master. So if there was aggrievement and injustice present before death, her spirit would continue to haunt the person who brought upon her death." Wuxia said very slowly. He stared at Xianyuan Che, who was in a daze, looking like he had been dealt an enormous blow. Wuxia curled up the corners of his lips and picked up the wine urn with one hand. He took a large gulping swallow with a throw of his head backwards, before he wiped the trickle of wine that had spilled out the corners of his mouth with his sleeve indifferently, and then lifted his foot to walk out from there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At the very moment he stood outside, his footsteps halted a moment as he said emotionlessly, "I know that this matter does not have anything to do with you, but what happened back then is something I will never be able to forget. So Xianyuan Che, I had originally not wanted to bring the matter up ever again, but since everything is out in the open now, then we can only do this. The two of us are probably destined to be brothers, and in future, we should just treat each other as strangers." Upon saying that, the tall, slender body then gradually went further into the distance. "Strangers? Huh? You wish?" A glint of darkness then flashed across the man's gentle and refined face, and the exquisite wine cup in his hand was suddenly crushed into dust. Chapter 92. 1. Hades Canyon. The day for training in the wilderness arrived in the blink of an eye. Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu had received strict instructions from their mother that if they were not able to establish friendly relations with the pair of siblings from the tranquil abode, they must remember that they must at least not become enemies. Although the two sisters did not know the reason for that, but upon hearing that even the highly shrewd Emohan Yen, who was known to be brilliant and sophisticated in her ways, had fallen before that pair of siblings, the hearts of the sisters immediately quivered in trepidation, quietening themselves down. It was heard that the last Qingyu was even an elixir cultivator as well, and following behind her might just earn them some advantages, and the two sisters started hatching their own plans. Qin Fong came bright and early to the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, at roughly the time that the servants were just waking up. The sky was just turning the color of a fish's underbelly over the horizon, and he had not expected that he would see two figures standing at the door, seeming like they had already been waiting there for very long. Qin Fong's face lit up with a tinge of admiration, and he walked over there to say, "The two of you woke up so early?" The two people stopped their conversation when they saw that Qin Fong had come, and Qingyu smiled as she said, "Even the elder is here so early. How can we possibly expect you to wait for us instead?" Qin Fong nodded his head in satisfaction. He had originally set the time as the third quarter of the Mao hour just at dawn, and he had come about half an hour early. But it was clear to see that these two young ones had been waiting here for a long time, and he liked people who were on time very much, because it was not time yet, and the sisters Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu had not yet come. Qin Fong then chatted with the pair of siblings for a while. His wise and intelligent gaze then looked on appraisingly at the young lady, with that countenance of peerless beauty, and her smiling eyes. Without knowing why, he could not help but feel that the lass was hiding quite a lot of secrets. From the time that she managed to hide her highly profound cultivation back before, Qin Fong was already a little suspicious that her real abilities were actually more than she was showing. With that thought in mind, he then asked carefully probingly, "Do you know why I want all of you to set off from here early?" Hearing that, Qingyu pressed her lips together in a smile, and she then turned to look towards the youth beside her with an eyebrow arched up. "You want us to get into the habit of waking up early, so that our bodies are able to adjust to its optimum state, which would aid us greatly in our cultivation." Qin Fong's brows creased into a frown as he shook his head. Qingyu chuckled softly, and then said, "Because we are going to the Hades Canyon this time, and the place is filled with a thick vaporous miasma, which grows even thicker under the beating of the sun's rays. But once it reaches the Mao hour, the miasma will recede, and we will only be able to enter that place at this time. Otherwise, once the sky grows bright, we'll not even be able to find the entrance into the place." Hearing Qingyu's explanation, the youth then nodded his head in understanding. Qin Fong then said in surprise, "How did you know that we'll be going to Hades Canyon? And how did you come to know about the time the miasma will recede?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Over the recent period, the elder has spoken to us about many places filled with various dangers, and described the characteristics and weaknesses of many types of spirit beasts. The Hades Canyon is a place that is famously known to have many spirit beasts, where all kinds and variety of them roam, and the level of danger in this place is not exceptionally high, considered to be just slightly above average in level, which is most suitable for us, people who are undergoing training in the wilderness for the first time. As for the time the miasma recedes, Qing Yu's words paused a moment, before she then continued in a slightly pleased tone. I discovered that when I went to the perimeters of Hades Canyon and remained there overnight. The young lady's words astounded Qin Fang even more. That also meant, under the circumstances, that nothing had been revealed to her. She had based merely on the small signs and little clues he had unconsciously revealed over the recent period with his words, to deduce and ascertain the location of their wilderness training he had decided upon. Chapter 92. 2. Hades Canyon, and as such a young little girl, she had actually dared to go running all by herself to scout out such a dangerous place. That kind of bravery made Qin Fang unable to help himself, but sigh aloud. Truly an example of newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. Besides her, Qing Bei could only glance at her helplessly. No wonder he had not seen her around a couple of days back. So she had gone off on her own to scout the place. The few of them continued to chat, and 3/4 of an hour passed without them knowing. The sound of a flurry of hurried footsteps then reached their ears from inside the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, before the figure of Yan Shiwu appeared first, as Yan Shirua came from behind looking rather dispirited, almost as if she had not fully awakened from sleep. Although Qin Fang was feeling slightly displeased, he did not say anything. The 3/4 of the Mao hour might have passed, but they were not really very late. They were after all spoilt and pampered young misses used to fine clothes and food, and they had probably never had to wake up so early ever before. Compared to Qing Yu and Qing Bei, Qin Fang was rather displeased with the pair of sisters. Though they lived in same manor of the Duke, the characters of the two pairs of siblings differed very greatly. The Hades Canyon was in the western side of the Green Wave Kingdom, and it would take them less than an hour to reach there from the imperial capital on horseback, and the sky wouldn't have brightened by much at that time. After Qin Fang brought them to the destination, he would not be moving together with them after that, but went on to give each of them a transmission jade token. If they came to encounter danger, or they are unable to remain in there any longer, they would just have to crush the jade token, and they would be able to come out. But once the jade token was crushed, it would mean that they had failed the wilderness training. The environment inside Hades Canyon was rather unusual. It was almost always pitch dark inside, and there were only about 4 hours of daylight in there every day, with the entire place plunged in darkness the rest of the time. If one remained in there for too long, they would easily lose track of the time and date. Hence, Qin Fang had set the time for their wilderness training at 10 days. He would come back here to receive them after 10 days. When the few of them reached the Hades Canyon, a large part of the sky had lit up, gradually turning brighter. The entrance into the Hades Canyon showed itself fleetingly before them under a veil of white misty fog. It was a hole formed from strangely bent trees that was the height of several men. I will only be escorting all of you up to here. All of you can go your own way inside now, Qin Fang said indifferently. The mission I am giving you for this training is for each of you to collect at least 5 spirit beast cores, that is of the 3rd level or higher. Yes, Elder. The few of them answered. Under Qin Fang's watchful gaze, they all went into the thick blurry fog and walked through the entryway. In almost the same instant that they came into the fog, it seemed as if the fog had suddenly become a lot thicker and was emanating a faint, almost unnoticeable fragrance. Qin Fang quickly retreated back by a few steps and covered his nose and mouth. The miasma was as dangerous as he had thought, and he wondered if all of them would be able to pull through. The entrance that was formed by the misshapen trees was now fully hidden, and not a sign of its existence could be seen anymore. But not long after Qin Fang left, the enormous trees under the miasma suddenly quivered like humans, and after a few rounds of transformation, the hole formed by the trees suddenly disappeared completely, turning to become a row of tall trees in a forest that could not look any more ordinary. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, the little fox went to the Hades Canyon? At that same moment, in a private room within the fragrance court, the violet eyes of a man glinted as he asked, In front of him, Bai Jiyan nodded his head. That's right. I just came to know about it. It seems like they set off yesterday before dawn, and they went there for rigorous training to enable them to be admitted into the Faint Mist sect. Is that right? Lu Junyao curled up the ends of his lips. He then continued to ask, what's the situation like in Cloud Heaven recently? Chapter 92. 3. Hades Canyon. The batch of elixir cultivators we recruited before had quite a number of spies who sneaked in trying to gather information, but Little Monster was really smart. He brought out the antidote elixir cultivated by Qingyu, asked all of them to list out a breakdown of its components, and they had to produce an elixir that was exactly the same. What do you think was the result? When Bai Jiyan spoke of that, the expression on his face just shone with delight. Not to even mention cultivating the elixir, not a single one among them was able to even name all the components correctly. I have to say that it is truly such a big waste that the lass is not in Cloud Heaven. With her level of talent and ability, even if she was in the White Fin Lands, the guild master of their elixir cultivator guild will have to give up his position for her. You really think so highly of her? Lu Junyao said with an almost imperceptible smile. Anyone who was able to remain by Lu Junyao's side were all not ordinary people, and they were all afflicted with the same condition, which was arrogant haughtiness. Besides their own lord, they looked down on everyone else, with Bai Jiyan the most extreme among the whole lot. Even in Cloud Heaven itself, there were not many people who convinced him, but his impression of Qingyu had always been very good. Hearing that, Bai Jiyan then blinked his beautiful-looking peach blossom-like eyes. That is only natural. Not to mention that her medical skills are already a few heads higher than mine, but just based on the fact that as a puerile little girl back then, she was able to escape from under your hands without a scratch on her, and had even stolen the polar fire core. Such guts and resourcefulness is enough to make me prostrate myself before her. But there is one matter that I still do not understand. The joking expression on Bai Jiyan's face was suddenly restrained. The voodoo curse you were afflicted with back then was so powerful that even I was not able to get close at all. How come you were still fine when that little lass touched you? Lu Junyao was speechless. If even a superior grade elixir cultivator like you does not know, how could I possibly know anything about that? Lu Junyao had not said a word when Bai Jiyan's expression froze for a moment, like he had just thought of something highly incredible. His tone of voice was rather hesitant as he said, could it possibly be like what is portrayed in all those skits everywhere? That only the one that is destined by fate is able to come in such close proximity? Lu Junyao's gaze glinted sharply, and he then said in a dark tone, I think you stayed too long in these warm and gentle villages for too long. That kind of thinking is highly dangerous. Bai Jiyan was puzzled. Dangerous? I am already several hundred years old, and to me, that little fox is no different from a little young and innocent child. You can actually spout such words like the one destined by fate. Isn't that very dangerous? Lu Junyao retorted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bai Jiyan's face was serious. So what? Although the little lass is a little young, but her mind and the way she deals with things are anything but innocent. Moreover, she has good looks and has great character. Why can't she be the one destined in your life? Speaking up to this point, Bai Jiyan's demeanor had become confrontational. Feeling highly displeased with the attitude Lu Junyao was showing, Bai Jiyan was taking a terrifying stance that seemed to be saying, the maiden is good in every single way, so how could you possibly not like her? Ignoring Bai Jiyan's nagging, a twitch tugged at Lu Junyao's temple, as he resisted the urge to throw the person in front of him out of the window, but went on to say softly instead, I heard that the injured lightning blaze unicorn you saved back then has advanced to the 11th level? That's right. The last time it advanced, I was almost struck half to death by its lightning tribulations. It's really so troublesome in these low-level lands. All spirit beasts above the 8th level have to be strictly confined. Lu Junyao succeeded in diverting Bai Jiyan's attention away. Speaking of this, I had never thought that there would be such a great seedling of spirit beasts in such low-level lands. If I train and nurture it properly, it might have a chance of becoming a super divine beast. Where did you place it? Although it would be contained within a barrier, a lightning blaze unicorn beast like that could not possibly be kept in any ordinary place for long. Chapter 93. 1. Did this fella just fart? Bai Jiyan shrugged his shoulders indifferently. In Hades Canyon, the geographical terrain there is rather unique, and the place is perpetually covered in a miasma of smog, the space in there ever-changing, a well-concealed place which is perfect for it to rest and recuperate. The voice had just fallen when Lu Junyao's handsome-looking countenance darkened, and his eyes narrowed to a slit as he stared at Bai Jiyan. What did you say? I told you it's in Hades Canyon, right? When Bai Jiyan spoke those words, he seemed to feel that something felt wrong, and the color of his face immediately changed. Hades Canyon. Oh God. Damn. It was still daytime in Hades Canyon at that moment, and an occasional strange-sounding screech would sound out in the skies overhead intermittently. Besides that, it felt unusually quiet. Yanshiro was being rather dense, as even having come into such a dangerous place, she was still being so dispirited and downcast. It wasn't until they heard the strange calls that she sobered up a little. Yanshiwu was watching the two people walking in front of her, and her eyes then flashed with a glint, before she pulled Yanshiro along to quickly catch up to the pair of twins in front. Sis, did you come inside when you came here previously? Qingbei slanted his head to the side and asked. Qingyu raised an eyebrow and glanced at him before she replied. I stayed only at the perimeters the last time, and did not come in. Thinking back about it, it was rather strange. She had gone to many dangerous places throughout the years, but somehow did not come here to Hades Canyon itself. The reason for that was not clear to her. It was as if this place had somehow been forgotten. After walking a good distance, what was surprising was that they did not encounter even the shadow of a single spirit beast. It was rumored that spirit beasts roam everywhere in the Hades Canyon, and they were starting to think that all of that had just been greatly exaggerated. But at that moment, they were about to face their first difficulty in there. Night was falling. The night that could last as long as 20 hours. A natural environment that was completely different from the world outside, which would cause one's heart to inadvertently grow nervous. A person would always come to feel a kind of inexplicable fear towards darkness, because it could hide many unknown dangers which might be quietly growing under the cover of such blind darkness. Only Qingyu's eyes possessed an exceptional kind of sight, able to see in the dark. But all the others could not do that, and being shrouded in darkness for such long hours would cause their mind to grow weak and fill up with unease. Her eyes narrowed, and she suddenly made a signal with her hand. A brilliant ball of golden red streaked fire then appeared at her fingertips, illuminating the area around them against the darkness. Qingbei did not show too big of a reaction, but Yanshiro jumped with shock where she then asked in surprise. What is this skill? She had heard that Qingyu had been ascertained to be a fire element wielder in the tests they underwent before, and she was actually able to summon fire out of thin air like this? Qingyu ignored her, and just said ominously, There are some tree twigs on the ground beside you. Go pick some, and we can build a fire. Yanshiro's eyes widened as she glared, and she raised a finger up to point at her nose in disbelief. You want me to go pick tree twigs? Yan Qingyu, are you sure you are asking the right person? I am the Eternal Peace Duke Manor's third young miss, and your elder sister. And you actually dare to order me to go carry out such a lowly and menial task. It was just gathering some twigs, and it has become a lowly menial task. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It was be said that this girl's princess syndrome is rather serious. Looking at her face that looked like she had suffered some grave and unpardonable insult, Qingbei then glanced scathingly at her and said, Just go when you're told to. In here, there are no young misses or princesses, but only people who are alive or dead. Whether you would become a dead person would depend entirely on how you perform. If that girl does not rely on his elder sister, you won't even have to mention spirit beast cores. It would be a challenge for her just to remain alive in here. And here she was prissily putting on airs. How utterly foolish. Having been snubbed, Yan Shiro's face immediately turned even more ugly. Yan Shiwu beside her tugged at her sleeve lightly and signaled for her to be more cooperative. It was only then that Yan Shiro gave up and crouched down to pick up twigs with a highly aggrieved face. Chapter 93. 2. Did this fella just fart? Qingyu could not help but smile as she watched that scene, and waited a good while for Yan Shiro to gather the twigs. She then lit a fire with those twigs which brightened up the area around them. Yan Shiro threw an indignant glare towards her, and then shuffled over closer to the fire. She was just about to sit down and rest when her bottom sat upon something soft. Her entire body stiffened up, and she only jumped up half a beat later to let out a sharp and shrill scream. Eek, what's that? The few of them turned their eyes to stare and saw a brown little snake that was about as thick as a thumb, coiled up lazily in sleep. It was rudely awakened by Yan Shiro when she sat on it, its eyes not yet fully open before it was shocked awake by a shrill scream. The little snake then showed high human contempt in its eyes and expression before it flicked its tail and stuck out its forked tongue in a loud hiss as it turned to slither away. All these lame humans. Why do I bump into them everywhere? Can't even get myself some peaceful sleep. Qingyu had watched all that happen, and her phoenix-like eyes lit up with amusement. That little snake seems to have gained intelligence, and the look it showed in its eyes just now was so funny. Yan Shiro's face was an ugly shade as she looked at the little snake slithering away. It was quite a while before she then said rather awkwardly, So it was a snake. What did you think it was? Qingyu asked as she swept her emotionless gaze over Yan Shiro. Don't make such a big deal out of little things like this. Screaming so loudly, are you trying to draw all the spirit beasts to us? I'm sorry, it wasn't on purpose. Yan Shiro had also realized that her reaction just now had been very loud. If that had really attracted all the beasts here, not to mention completing the mission, she might very well just lose her life here. The group then sat down around the fire, the firelight lighting up the young lady's face with those exquisite features, making it look like there was a ball of fire burning within her alluring phoenix-like eyes. What should we do now? Yan Shiwu, who had remained silent all this time, suddenly asked. It's all pitch dark in here and nothing can be seen. We do not know where all those spirit beasts are hiding, and if they suddenly run out to attack us. In Hades Canyon, only during the 4 hours of daylight was it comparatively safer, as most of the spirit beasts would be resting. But when night came, they would all start to get restless. Don't worry, regular spirit beasts would not dare to come close. Qingyu said with a smile. This fire that she lit was not meant to illuminate the area. Most spirit beasts were fearful of fire, and moreover, she had not used just any regular kind of fire. If one got caught even the slightest by the flames, it would be inextinguishable. Unless it was a spirit beast who had not yet gained intelligence. Otherwise all lower-leveled spirit beasts would not come rushing to their own deaths to come attack them. We've walked for so long. Take this chance to get some rest first. Qingyu opened her mouth to say, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. At that moment, an untimely low growl suddenly sounded, and the few of them froze in place for a moment. It was Yan Shiro. With her head lowered, she then said in a voice as small as a mosquito's, I'm hungry. In order to train them in their survival skills, Qin Fong had been incredibly strict. He had only allowed them to bring 2 bottles of water, and prohibited them from bringing any food at all. They were to deal with it themselves when they got hungry, and he had even inspected all of them to ensure it. Yan Shiro was one of the plumper ones among them, and her energy level depleted faster as well. She had woken up so early this morning, and besides having drunk some water, she had not had anything to eat at all, causing her to almost collapse from hunger. Moreover, she had just gotten such a great shock from the little snake, which had further drained her out quite a bit, which just made her even more hungry now. Chapter 93. 3. Did this fella just fart? Qingyu was already able to fast for 1 month straight, and she would be fine even if she had no food or drink in that period, but just some elixirs to replenish her spirit energy. The others in the group would not be able to withstand that, however, and asking them to go hungry like that would not be a solution. Thinking about that, she then got up to her feet. In that case, I'll go take a look nearby to see whether there is anything edible. All of you stay here and wait. Don't go running off on your own. Sis, I'll go with you. It's too dangerous to go alone. Qingbei climbed to his feet as well when he heard that. Qingyu, however, shook her head. I'll be fine. You just stay here, as it would be even more dangerous to leave just the two of them here. I'll be back very quickly. Upon saying that, she then turned around and quickly disappeared from sight. Qingbei did not even have the chance to say anything as he watched her disappear in the distance. The youth's handsome countenance creased up, albeit so faintly it was almost unnoticeable. He did not know whether he was mistaken, but from the moment they came into Hades Canyon, he seemed to feel that there was a pair of eyes constantly watching them, which made him feel highly uneasy, and that was why he was so worried about Qingyu. His good-looking pair of eyes then turned to glance icily at the downcast Yin Shiro. This girl is just so troublesome. On the other side, Qingyu cast her gaze slowly over the area in front, her eyes appraising the surroundings. This Hades Canyon is really rather special. It is called a canyon, but she had not seen that many rocks, but just a sparse and empty place. Wonder where all those spirit beasts usually roam in here. She was immersed in her thoughts when a cold wind suddenly blew past her ear, and a tiny figure flashed past her right before her eyes, so quickly that she had not been able to clearly see what it was. What was that? A spirit beast? Quick, mistress, pursue it quick. Don't let that escape. At that moment, Zhang Mai's voice suddenly rang out teasingly. He had just woken up and had come to encounter such an interesting incident. Qingyu was puzzled. Why? That fella just stole something from you. Qingyu's face was surprised a moment as her hand subconsciously reached to feel her hip, only to find the medicine bag with the mosquito repellent she had made all empty, and that all the elixirs in there were gone. The corner of her mouth twitched. That was meant to keep away the bugs, you know, although the smell is rather enticing. But mistakenly ingesting it will rumble the stomach. Which unfortunate little spirit beast could be so blind? Choosing to ignore that little interlude, her eyes darted around in search, and finally saw quite a number of red fruits, hanging high up in a tall spire-shaped tree. They were rather large in size, and they looked quite similar to apples. But at that height, Qingyu was still contemplating whether she should climb up that tree to pick the fruits, when another cold gust of wind whizzed past, and that lightning-quick figure almost crashed right into her. But she managed to dodge nimbly to the side. In the end, that poor little figure crashed good and proper right into the tree just behind her with a heavy thud. The sound so loud it even caused her to cringe. She saw that it was a tiny animal that was completely white, highly fleshly and cuddly with sharp-pointed ears, its tail round like a ball, looking both like a cat and a rabbit at the same time. It was probably dazed from the knock, as the little fella's 4 limbs remained splayed out upon the tree, not moving at all for a good while. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu arched up an eyebrow, and hesitated a moment before she walked over to it. In the end, before she had even gotten close, she heard a sound going put, completely out of place in this quiet and silent night here, which was accompanied by a most unbelievably incapacitating odor. Qingyu was completely shocked. Had she been mistaken with what she just heard? Did that fella just... Did it just fart? And... Qingyu wrinkled up her brows, her slender hand quickly snapping up to cover her nose. The smell was truly powerfully pungent. Chapter 94. 1. Meat to eat. Qingyu's face was one of undisguised contempt as she took several steps back. And at that moment, that white little ball then mournfully slid itself down from the tree, and then turned to face her, its large azure blue eyes that looked as if they had just been cleaned looking aggrievedly at her. There was no need to mention just how forlorn a look its small little face was, its tiny paws coming to carry out an action that was so hilarious to see. Qingyu lifted an eyebrow up calmly, and looked down at the little creature from her higher vantage point. It was looking rather indignant, and its two tiny paws held its small little bottom. But despite that, the farts were still sounding out in incessant mini-explosions one after another, rocking that tiny little body. Finally, Qingyu could not hold herself back from laughing seeing the little creature's antics. Its tiny face looking so mournful like there was nothing worth living for in life anymore. Qingyu then tossed a black-colored elixir over. "Nah, this is an antidote. Eat it and you'll be fine." Hearing that, the little creature then released its paws that were holding its bottom tightly, and picked up the elixir, and popped it into its mouth straight down its throat. After a while the urge to fart continuously then disappeared. Next time see if you'll still dare to nick people's things to eat. This is a good example of suffering the consequences of your own actions. Qingyu said with a smile, not caring whether it understood her. She then tapped the tip of her toes on the ground lightly, and leapt up into the tree to pick some of those fruits. She took a whiff. Most sweet and fresh-smelling fruits are usually edible. But it was clear to see that those fruits would not be able to fill one's stomach, so should she hunt for a spirit beast or two for them to roast and eat. Her gaze then swung over to the tiny spirit beast looking at her with its large eyes. Forget it. That tiny little one would not even be enough for one person. But it looks rather beautiful though. With its big round intelligent blue eyes, it's really exceptionally adorable. And this is my first time seeing such a creature. A rabbit that does not look like a rabbit, a fox that does not look like a fox. She then took a couple of steps, about to go see if there were any signs of spirit beasts around, and she came to sense some movement behind her. She turned around and saw that little thing following right in her footsteps. Seeing that she had stopped, it also halted its step, and just looked at her innocently with its large clear eyes. Qingyu laughed softly and asked, "Why are you following me? Are you hungry?" As she spoke, she gave a couple of the fruits she had just picked to it. The little creature stretched out its tiny paws, and hugged the fruits within its short paws, and took a crunchy bite before its mouth began to chew vigorously. But in the instant that Qingyu lifted a foot to leave, it grabbed up the fruits in its stubby paws again, and went following with a pitter-patter of its legs. Qingyu did not know what to make of it. What does it really want? Just eat those fruits you have. Don't follow me. I did not come here to play. Go back to where you came from, and be careful that you do not get preyed upon by others. You're so small that you aren't even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Understand? Qingyu said as her eyebrow arched up, pausing in between each word as she preached. The little creature seemed to be highly intelligent, and it looked like it could understand what she was saying. So immediately after Qingyu said those words, she just turned herself around and strode away. "Mistress, I can't help but feel that there is something unusual about that little fella." Zhang Mai's doubtful voice suddenly sounded. It felt like he had suddenly come to remember something, but he just could not put it into words. "What is unusual about it?" Qingyu asked casually. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. From what she could see, it was just a spirit beast that was more attractive looking than others, and a little more intelligent. Zhang Mai was deep in thought for a moment before he then said slowly, "I seem to have felt an aura that I am rather familiar with." Qingyu did not fully understand that, and she was just about to ask for clarification, when a gentle and youthful voice, that was tinged with a certain sadness, rang out behind her. And under that soundless and silent night, it sent a chill running through Qingyu, causing her back to break out in cold sweat. Was she hearing things in here? Chapter 94. Too meat to eat? Little burrow, did you just hear a child's voice or not? Qingyu asked softly. Luckily, she had little burrow accompanying her. Otherwise hearing such a voice on such a dark night like this would really be too frightening. Yet, Zhang Mai answered in an equally cautious voice. I thought I heard a child's voice calling out. Mother, you don't want me anymore. Boo-hoo-hoo. This time, the voice sounded highly mournful, which then burst straight into tears, filled with endless sorrow, highly heart-wrenching to hear. Qingyu's entire body stiffened up. Mistress, why not? You turn around to take a look? Zhang Mai inquired in a soft voice. Don't you know that I am terrified of baby spirits the most? Do you want to scare your mistress to death? Qingyu said, her face drained of all color. The only weakness she had her entire life, the thing she feared the most, were dark aggrieved spirits of babies. When such a perfectly fresh life was shrouded over by dark death, turning them into aggrieved spirits filled with terrifying rage, just how painful and stifling would it make one feel? How do you know that it's a baby spirit? Can't it just be a lost child? Zhang Mai retorted. Qingyu rolled her eyes. Would a child from any normal family come running out to such a dangerous place to play? Are you stupid, or do you think I'm dumb? After saying that, she took a deep breath. Don't turn around, don't look, don't listen, mother. Don't abandon Meatball. Something soft and fleshy suddenly grabbed onto her ankle, holding back her footsteps. Qingyu's body shook and she lowered her head to look, only to discover that the round and pudgy little beast was clinging onto her leg for dear life. Its tiny body even trembling intermittently, like it was sobbing spasmodically. Seeing that there was no reaction from her after a while, it then lifted its head, its beautiful large eyes brimming over with tears as they flowed down incessantly. The adorable little face was weeping so hard that it seemed it might collapse at any moment, its slightly open mouth revealing tiny sharp teeth as it whimpered pitifully to say, "Mother, Meatball will not be greedy anymore. Don't abandon Meatball." Qingyu stood frozen in her spot, her face blank, unable to recover from the shock. Qingyu then spoke inwardly. "Little Burrow, are you seeing this? The little thing can actually talk." "I see it," Zhang Mai replied, the expression on his face wooden. "It being able to speak is not the critical point here. The most important thing is, Mistress, it called you mother. Who did you have this little thing with? Have your big fat head." Qingyu gnawed out those few words with her teeth tightly clenched together. It was probably because she had suffered such a great shock earlier, and was now completely befuddled by this scene before her. Qingyu's rage rose up within her, and she finally shouted out those words in a roar. The little fella by her foot, who was still wrecked by its heaving sobs, was startled a moment before it pouted, looking highly hurt. Meatball is not fat. Although it was rotund, but it wasn't exactly fat. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You having heard it say Meatball so many times. Qingyu cast her gaze onto it before she grabbed on the little fella's neck and picked it up off the ground, bringing it right in front of her face to look at it straight in the eyes. "What in the devil is this Meatball you keep mentioning? Meatball is not a devil. Meatball is me." The little beast's blue eyes blinked pitifully in innocence. "You are called Meatball?" Qingyu was taken aback for a moment, before she burst into laughter, almost unable to breathe. "Ha ha ha. Who is so ingenious to give you such a name? Can it be any tackier?" But after Qingyu picked up the creature, she then came to discover that though the little thing looked so round on the surface, it was in fact because of its fluffy fur that made it look like a ball of snow, and to realize that it did not even weigh 2 taels, extremely light. Chapter 94. 3 Meat to Eat? The little beast was very clever, and it realized that Qingyu was making fun of it, so it pawed the air in front of it a couple of times, and then said in a tiny voice, "Because Meatball likes to eat meat, and wants to eat it every day. That is why Mother gave Meatball the name Meatball. Has Mother forgotten all about it?" "Me?" Qingyu was bewildered as she pointed her finger at her own nose. "Little one, you've mistaken me for someone else. I do not know you at all." As she said that, she released her grip as she put the little creature down on the ground. She then said to it with a stern face, "I'm warning you. Do not follow me anymore. I am not your mother, and if continue to pester me, do you believe that I will throw you right into the nests of the other spirit beasts, where you will be gobbled right up? Don't believe." The little beast shook its head to say and stuck its tongue out impishly. Mother has tried to scare Meatball like this before, but it always ends up having all of them run away when they see Meatball. "Oh." Qingyu arched up an eyebrow, thinking it rather funny. A small little thing like you still dares to brag so much? "Meatball isn't bragging," Meatball said with a pout, looking like it wanted to defend itself. But seeing that cold and impatient look on Mother, it did not dare to continue to prattle on too much, and just clamped its mouth shut. Qingyu could not be bothered to continue arguing with the little creature. She had come out for quite a while, and if she doesn't go back soon, little Bei might get worried. Mother, wait for Meatball. The figure in front suddenly halted, and the little beast almost crashed right into her. I told you not to follow me. A twitch throbbed at Qingyu's temple, like she was silently holding back the rage that was threatening to explode. If you continue to follow, I might just roast you and eat you up. She had not been able to find much to eat. A chill ran through Meatball's rotund body, and it then said softly, Mother, Meatball can help you find food. Can you bring Meatball with you? With such a gentle and obedient-sounding voice, its azure blue eyes staring unblinking at her, filled with cautious anticipation and unrestrained adoration. It looked so pure and innocent, like one would be able to see through what it was thinking with just a single glance. Qingyu's heart unconsciously softened. I really am not your mother. You are. Meatball remembers Mother's scent. The elixirs Mother cultivates are the yummiest. Oh heavens! It was such an adorable little thing. She suddenly became worried that if it encountered people with ill intentions, would it be deceived and end up roasted and eaten? Qingyu sighed and seemingly helplessly, she reached out her hands and said, Come, I'll carry you. Meatball's tiny body quivered with joy and its beautiful large eyes became wet, looking like tears were going to fall the very next moment. Qingyu creased up her brows and said in a low tone, If you cry, I will dump you here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At almost the same moment her voice fell. The little fella scuttled like a gust of wind into her arms. Its soft and warm tiny body plopped obediently within, not moving an inch. Its tiny paws clutched her clothes tightly, seemingly afraid that it would be abandoned. The corners of Qingyu's lips lifted slightly, as she raised a hand to ruffle the little beast's head hard, moving back in the direction she had come. In her arms, Meatball's large eyes closed from the comforting touch, an expression of absolute bliss on its face. Mother, Meatball finally found you. The night breeze rushed past, which blew away its soft and faint whisper. On the other side, Qingbei was keeping track of the time in his heart, and when he still did not see Qingyu come back, he could not help but grew anxious. He stood up thinking to go look for her, and when Yen Shiro, who was rather timid, saw that he looked like he was going to leave, she immediately asked, Where are you going? Qingbei was already getting rather impatient with her, and really could not be bothered with her, but at that moment, Yen Shiro's eyes suddenly grew wide with terror. What? What is that? Chapter 95. 1. Roast suckling pig. Under the indistinct shadows of the row of trees not too far from them, something seemed to be shifting its way lightly towards them, and had carelessly bumped into a tree trunk, causing a scatter of leaves to fall from it. The expression on Qingbei's face changed slightly. Could it be a spirit beast that had been drawn to them by the firelight? After a while, that body of that thing in the shadows then slowly stuck its body out, revealing itself. It was a great spiked hog whose body was as thick as 3 grown men, with sharp spiky quills running the entire length of his body, where even its sharp snout was densely covered with short tiny spikes. It looked highly powerful, and if it ran into a person with those spikes, that person would have more holes than a honeycomb. At that moment, the great spiked hog was staring at them with its pair of huge wide eyes, its open mouth dripping with drool as it panted heavily with its coarse breath, looking very hungry, and had just sighted highly delicious prey. Qingbei clenched up his fists unconsciously as he watched its movements closely. Finally, after staring them down, the great spiked hog's massive body, which had looked somewhat clumsy, suddenly charged speedily towards the foremost youth in front, the 2 long sharp spikes at the top of its head glinting coldly in the night, seemingly seeking to bore right through the human before it. Qingbei's gaze darkened, and he hurriedly dodged to the side, causing the great spiked hog to miss completely and crash into a tree right behind. 2 deep holes appeared in the thick tree trunk before it then collapsed and fell. Seeing that its attack had failed, and that the human had actually been able to evade its attack, The great spike hog became frustrated, and it let out a couple of grunts through its mouth before its eyes grew more vicious. But the tall and elegant youth standing before it looked calm and unruffled, not showing the slightest tinge of fear or terror in his demeanor. The great spiked hog had attained intelligence and was capable of a human's most rudimentary level of thought. It was a 5th-level spirit beast, and it was almost at the same level as an average expert pugilist among humans. But the difference was that beast species possessed higher attack and defense powers than humans, so if they were to pit themselves against humans at the same level, they would be able to slaughter the opponent despite the similar cultivation levels. But with this youth before its eyes, it could not comprehend the extent of his cultivation, but it was instead feeling slightly intimidated from the aura exuding from the youth's body. After contemplation, the great spiked hog then decided to change its target onto the 2 weak and frail girls beside the fire. When the 2 girls saw the massive spirit beast that looked so fierce and malicious, their faces immediately grew pale, and they clutched each other tightly. But the spirit beast just paced around about 10 meters away from them, and did not come any closer. Of course, they were not aware that the fire Qingyu had left behind had not only illuminated the area, but was also able to ward off a spirit beast's attack. The great spiked hog was not dumb, even though it did not know why the color of the fire was different from regular fire. But its innate animal instinct warned it of the danger, and that it must not go close. Finding no way to get to its prey, the great spiked hog that had gone hungry for days, and had finally been able to sneak out in search for food was suddenly feeling greatly infuriated. It took 2 steps forward, and then charged towards the 2 girls in rage with a roar. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. With that roar, the 2 sisters suddenly found themselves in a highly dangerous predicament. The 2 of them had been scared frozen stiff at the sight of such an enormous and terrifying spirit beast, and upon hearing that rage-filled roar, a chill immediately shot through their bodies that enabled them to run a distance away from the fire. And it was that action that gave the great spiked hog an opening to strike. The nimble body shot forward speedily in that instant, its large mouth that was exuding a stench wide open, attacking with a vicious bite. Eek! Help! Chapter 95. 2. Roasted suckling pig. The sharp and terrified shrill shrieks of the girls rang out under the quiet night, startling the flocks of birds hidden within the trees to flap their wings and take flight, which attracted the attention of many restless spirit beasts. Seeing that scene, the eyes of the gently handsome youth flashed with a glint, but he did not make any moves, and merely stood watching with a cold gaze, seeming like he had no intention of moving to help. In actual fact, he had detested those 2 girls for a very long time. Whenever he and Qingyu were bullied and berated by Mo Han Yen, those 2 girls would never fail to come trample upon them further, adding salt to the wound gleefully, finding delight from their misery. He had told himself back then that the day would come he would make all of them pay the price. On that side, Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu were so terror-struck all color had drained from their faces. Yan Shiwu was doing a little better, as she was able to at least close her eyes from the horror. But Yan Shiro had lost her mind from fright, screaming incessantly, Don't come any closer. Qingbei. Save me, Qingbei. Eek! Don't come any closer." Qingbei lowered his good-looking pair of eyes, and slowly turned his body around. To have people die an unexpected death while out on training in Hades Canyon isn't really something that was totally unheard of. In the worst-case scenario, they still had the jade token that Qin Fong had given to them, which would enable them to leave this place in one piece once they crush it. But if they are adamant on not leaving and an accident occurs, that will still be rather understandable. But for him to go save them? He really isn't that magnanimous. The great spiked hog's great speed had already brought it over the 10-pace distance to come right in front of them. At that moment, Yan Shiro fainted away from fright, while Yan Shiwu had her eyes closed, resigned to fate as she awaited the arrival of death. Just as Qingbei was about to leave the place to go look for Qingyu, the great spiked hog behind him suddenly howled loudly in pain. Bei was surprised a moment before he turned around to look. And he saw Yin Shiro and Yen Shiwu, who were to have been gobbled up by the great spiked hog, suddenly had their bodies ablaze with flames. The incredibly heat from the blazing flames could be felt even through the great spiked hog's impenetrable skin that was hard as steel. It seared through every single part of its body, a stinging pain that was more agonizing than death. And the only thing it could do was roll itself maniacally on the ground as it howled. But no matter what it did, the flames did not diminish in the slightest but grew in intensity instead, engulfing the great spike hog in a massive ball of flames, an absolutely astounding sight. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bei squinted his eyes and subconsciously peered further into the distance. A figure in white was slowly walking towards them, the bright light from the fire reflecting off that countenance of peerless beauty that looked as mesmerizing as an alluring seductress. I was just thinking about it, and here it is delivered straight to me. I was thinking where I should go look for food, and here I have a roasted suckling pig fall right into my lap. Qingyu said in a comforted tone. She then lifted an eyebrow when she saw the youth's dark expression, and she asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" Bei did not say anything, but just let his gaze fall upon the completely roasted great spiked hog that had fallen silent before he glanced at the sisters who had fainted and were unconscious at the side. I had thought that they would become the spirit beast's dinner today. Qingyu understood what was going through the youth's mind, and she reached a hand out to pat the youth on his shoulder reassuringly. What's past is past, and although they were indeed just so detestable before, but they had not done anything really so heinous that went against the heavens. You can seek repayment for all the misdeeds they had done in the past, but with 2 lives at stake here, it is no joking matter. Having spoken up to this point, Qingyu then paused a moment before she continued. If they were to have died, you will not come to feel good about it at all, and might even be overcome with guilt. Don't I know you well enough yet? Chapter 95. 3. Roast suckling pig. This foolish little brother of hers usually looked rather distant and aloof as a person, but was actually an incredibly kind and gentle soul at heart. Not to mention that the 2 sisters had lived under the same roof as him for so many years. Even if it was just a stranger, wanting him to just watch and not lift a finger to save someone would be a very hard thing for him to do. He would still not be able to answer to his conscience. Bei's tightly clenched fingers then finally relaxed slowly. I get it now. Qingyu's powerful and mysterious elixir fire had properly cooked the 5th level great spike hog without much trouble, and the flesh of the great spiked hog had become succulent after being roasted. She took a few steps forward and thrust her dagger into the top of the great spiked hog's head to slice it open, before she retrieved the blackish purple-colored core that was steaming slightly. Luckily, core crystals are not that easily affected by heat, or it would have melted into nothing from the blaze. Looking at the massive-sized great spiked hog, it could be seen that its girth had been largely due to its thick fur that covered its body, and now that it had been thoroughly roasted, it had shrunk significantly. Bei's face held a highly indescribable expression as he watched the young lady skillfully carve off the great spiked hog's hide and slicing its body open with her dagger. What are you doing? Of course we're gonna eat it. Aren't you hungry? Qingyu replied as she rolled her eyes at him. This thing is edible? Just don't bother what species of pig it really is, but it is still a pig after all. Haven't you eaten roasted suckling pig before? You're in for a treat today. Qingyu said earnestly as she threw the youth a wink. Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu, who had fainted away from fright, were just beginning to stir awake. When they saw that Qingyu had come back, they were highly delighted, but when they saw her busily cutting up some enormous-sized creature, they then asked in puzzlement. You're awake, Qingyu said with a smile. Apologies. I took a little longer out there, but came across something for us to eat. So hurry up and fill your stomach, and we can continue on our way when we're done. As she spoke, Qingyu stuck her dagger into a piece of meat that was smeared over with spices and handed it over to Yen Shiro. Yen Shiro was absolutely famished, and the great shock she had suffered had drained her completely. She took the meat and immediately gobbled on it greedily. Tastes so good. What kind of a meat is it? It's so fragrant. Qingbei watched her gorge herself, and he immediately felt his stomach turn. If she knew that it was the meat of the spirit beast that had very nearly eaten her up, it was wondered whether she would still be enjoying it so much. This roasted suckling pig. It's good, right? Qingyu said with a laugh. That's right, I also have some fruits here. All of Yen Shiro's attention had been fully drawn onto the delicious roast, so how could she possibly bother herself with those fruits? She did not even give them a glance. But Yen Shiwu, who always had a lighter palate, did not really like such greasy meat, and so she took a couple of the fruits and started taking small bites out of them. On the other side, Qingbei was also eating the fruits, and when his eyes spotted the hazy-faced Yen Shiro, for some unknown reason, a wicked sense of humor suddenly rose up inside him. Eat slowly. No one is fighting with you for it. That is meat from a 5th-level spirit beast, and I think eating it will definitely be very good for you. Qingbei said emotionlessly. Hearing that, Qingyu found it rather funny, but did not give the game away. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What kind of a 5th-level spirit beast? Yen Shiro asked as she chewed vigorously. It's the very same beast that just attacked us, which very nearly tore you into shreds. Meat from the great spiked hog. It's such a pitiful end for it to be eaten up by you. The youth shook his head as he spoke, looking highly regretful. Yen Shiro's chewing motion suddenly froze in place, before her eyes stared woodenly at the chunk of half-eaten meat in her hand. In the next second, her eyes unconsciously caught sight of something glinting under the light at the side, and she saw that it was the spiky hide of the great spiked hog. Blah! Chapter 96. 1. The entrance that disappeared because of what Qingbei said. Yen Shiro found everything she ate tasteless for the next several days. Towards that, Qingyu was also rather helpless, and could not do anything else but to stuff the remaining great spiked hog meat into the dimensional space she carried with her. At that moment, the tiny little beast was also inside, snoring roaringly, and upon smelling the meat's fragrance, it shivered and came awake, its eyes shining brightly. After getting Qingyu's permission, the little beast then physically proved one thing to her: to never be deceived by a person's outer appearance, and the exact same thing applied to beasts as well. Qingyu stared with eyes wide and mouth agape when she saw the little thing completely inhale a spirit beast that was several hundred times bigger than itself. Its stomach did not show the slightest sign of bloating at all, and it looked like it could really still eat. Qingyu did not know what to say. That's a bottomless pit there. She was suddenly feeling regret. Is she supposed to hunt a spirit beast every day from now on for the little fella? Fortunately, they were only going to be staying in here for 10 days. If it was for months, she was afraid that there might not be enough spirit beasts in the Hades Canyon to feed the little beast. No wonder it's called Meatball. It's a total carnivore, and its mistress didn't know it well at all. On the other side, at the fringe of Hades Canyon, quite a number of people had gathered there, and were currently discussing about something in low voices. It was not known what a burly and towering man among them heard, when he fell to the ground with a sorrowful expression. Heavens! How could something like this happen? I have just this one child. If I had known, I would not have allowed him to willfully go with the others for rigorous training. My younger brother is still in there. Are we really unable to get in? You can see that we are not even able to find the entrance. How are we going to get inside? All these people lived in places not too far away from the Hades Canyon, and someone heard a great commotion from inside during the night, and he had all come running to check the situation out. In the end, his soul was almost frightened right out of his body when he saw the scene, and he quickly went running back to gather more people. The Hades Canyon's entrance was a tall and large hole formed from the trees, and the entire place was filled with many gigantic ancient trees, twisted in many strange and unusual shapes. The entrance was almost shrouded in a persistent and impenetrable fog that would only dissipate at the Mao hour, which would gather again when the sky turned bright. A highly amazing phenomenon. Chapter 96. 2. The entrance that disappeared for two such young and outstanding-looking men to be coming to Hades Canyon at this time. The people there could roughly guess their intentions. Although the men looked like people not to be trifled with, one of them still came to say very cautiously, "Young men, are you intending to go into Hades Canyon? No matter what you came for, it's better that you leave quickly." Those two men who just arrived were Lu Junyao and Bai Jiyan. When he heard that Bai Jiyan had hidden the level 11 lightning blaze unicorn inside Hades Canyon, and that Qingyu was undergoing rigorous training in there, Lu Junyao immediately became highly restless. What a joke! A level 11 spirit beast. No, it could be termed to be a divine beast already. Not only would it possess exceptional intelligence, it would also be able to instantaneously kill a top-skilled expert from the mid-level realm. The lightning blaze unicorn is capable of wielding both the lightning and fire elements, and as its powerful bloodline runs within its body, it will be able to transform into human form when it advances to the 12th level, unlike regular spirit beasts who would need to wait till they reach level 15. If Qingyu and her group were to encounter it, that would purely be sending themselves to their deaths. When he heard those words of advice being said to them, Bai Jiyan immediately raised an eyebrow and inquired, "Why?" Because quite a number of people were gathered at that place, and they were blocking the view, Bai Jiyan could not see anything in front. Hence, he was naturally unaware of the situation. When the people saw that his demeanor looked rather insistent, they all then shook their heads with a sigh and parted to make way for him. Bai Jiyan was immediately stunned, his beautiful peach blossom-like eyes staring in shock. What is going on here? Where's the hole? How did it turn into this flat and bare land? It was Lu Junyao's first time here, and he was naturally unaware of the reason Bai Jiyan was so shocked. He then went on to ask indifferently, "What? The hole into Hades Canyon has disappeared." A corner of Bai Jiyan's lips twitched. Not only has it disappeared, the entire place has turned into flat and bare land, and there wasn't a single sign of the place left behind. "What do you mean the hole disappeared?" Lu Junyao cast his glance upon him. "Would it grow legs and go running off? I would really like to know as well," Bai Jiyan said, feeling helpless. He then turned to the people gathered there. "When did the entry hole become like this?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU just last night. I heard the commotion coming from here as I live the closest, and by the time I came running, the hole was already gone. A short-statured man said. Bai Jiyan's eyes narrowed, and an idea of what might have happened popped into his head, but he quickly brushed it off. That cannot be possible, right? What are you thinking? Beside him, Lu Junyao could not help but ask when he saw Bai Jiyan shaking his head in disbelief. "Junyao, I don't know if you have heard of this before. When a divine beast undergoes a change in form, it is a transformation that is equivalent to being completely reborn, and their powers would increase exponentially, which could directly cause its surroundings to change as well." Bai Jiyan explained worriedly, and the emotion in his eyes looked rather complicated. "But that fella just advanced to the 11th level barely 2 months ago. So how could it possibly advance in level again so quickly? That would really be quite scary. It must be known that it was a lot more difficult for spirit beasts to advance a level, where they might even not be able to advance once in several years. But if this had really been brought upon by that fella advancing into the next level, which caused Hades Canyon to change as well, that would really be some rather maniacal progression there. Chapter 96. 3. The entrance that disappeared. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed sharply. "You are saying that thing advanced another level?" "Highly possible." Bai Jiyan nodded like he was in pain. "Whether that is true or not, we'll know once we go take a look." Lu Junyao snorted lightly in derision, and his slender fingers immediately pulled at the air in front of him, to tear a dimensional hole right in front of him. that formed into a black vortex. Bai Jian subconsciously gulped. You dare to do something so strange and unusual right in front of so many people. Aren't you afraid that you'll be seen? Seeing that Lu Junyao's body had already disappeared into the black hole, Bai Jian quickly gathered back his thoughts and followed him inside. The next second, the vortex in the black hole then immediately shrank, gradually closing up completely. Everyone there was speechless. What just happened? Where did those two demons come from? On the other side, Qing Yu and her group continued to make their way forward in Hades Canyon. This was indeed one of the most dangerous and mysterious places around. When they had been making their way forward earlier, they saw that they were in a dark forest, and there were gigantic trees with thick and prickly branches everywhere. But after walking for a period of time, all the trees had suddenly disappeared, to be replaced by boundless and barren plains. The soil under their feet was not moist and soft like before, but had become exceptionally hard, like it had not been nourished by rain for a very long time, so dry that the ground was filled with a dense maze of crack lines. The cracks were so wide that a careless step might have them get their feet stuck in them. It was not known how long they had walked when they saw that the dark sky was slowly turning bright, allowing them to see that the barren plains were littered with many boulders. At a glance, it seemed like only towering boulders stood upon the plains, and there were no other living things around. Yen Shiro suddenly stumbled and twisted her foot slightly, immediately letting out a cry in pain. Sheesh! What kind of a damned place is this? The few of them paused in their steps to look at her. Seeing her seated on the ground, and about to remove her shoe and sock to check on her injury, Qing Yu raised an eyebrow and said in a rather chill voice, Better not look at it, and just continue walking. If something comes burrowing out from underground suddenly, it would be too late even if you run. The moment Yen Shiro heard that something might just burrow itself out from underground, she quickly got to her feet, kept staring into the crack with trepidation. Qing Yu laughed softly, and then turned around to continue to lead the way forward, her gaze surveying the surroundings on all sides. Looking at it, something did not feel right about the place. She did not even see a single blade of grass, but just so many large rocks blocking their way. She was deep in thought when her body suddenly paused, and she suddenly halted her footsteps. Sis, what's wrong? Qing Bei was right behind her, and seeing her stop, he asked in bewilderment. Qing Yu's eyes slowly narrowed up, and she turned her body to stare at a slim-shaped boulder behind them, the corners of her lips rising up slightly. Do you see that piece of boulder there? Hearing that, the few of them then followed her gaze and looked, but did not understand what she was talking about. What is wrong with that piece of rock? There are so many pieces of rocks just like that everywhere. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, it has followed us for quite a distance. From the moment we stepped onto these plains, it had always been around. Qing Yu said in a soft voice. Hearing what she said, Yen Shiro then felt a chill run up her spine, and she then said weakly, No, you can't be serious. Could you have been mistaken? You can trust the memory I possess, Qing Yu said, throwing her an indifferent glance. She then made a signal with her eyes to the youth. It was time for him to make a move. Qing Bei immediately understood. His lightning summoning palm had improved very rapidly over the recent period, and this would be the best time for him to test its power. With that thought, Qing Bei's eyes grew dark, and he transformed his hand into a blade that was imbued with dark purple electrifying light. He slashed his hand viciously towards the boulder, and a loud explosion burst out immediately. The boulder exploded, and a shadow inside pounced straight at Qing Bei. Chapter 97. 1. Demonic centipede. Qing Yu saw that long bright red creature, and her eyes widened as she stared. Seeing it charging straight at the youth in attack, she quickly shouted loudly, Dodge quickly! And upon hearing those words, though Qing Bei, who had been prepared to take on the creature, did not understand why, but having gotten used to placing his trust in Qing Yu, he quickly dodged to the side. But the creature's speed was just incredible. Its body that was tens of meters long retreated back in an instant to straighten itself out flat. A stamen-like part of its body at its mouth then quivered slightly, before a thick gooey liquid sprayed out. Qingbei was unable to avoid it in time, and a good half of his shoulder was hit. Having suffered absolutely heart-wrenching pain when he underwent treatment for his crippled legs before, he had developed quite a high tolerance for pain. But getting shot with that strange liquid, it had caused him to immediately cry out in agony and fall to the ground. Little Bei. The expression on Qing Yu's face sank. Ever since Qingbei came to regain the use of his legs, she had not allowed him to be injured again, but he was now seriously wounded by this creature here. When that creature had leapt out from the rock, she had immediately felt that something did not feel right. With a full bright red body, several tens of meters in length, its mouth with something that looked like a flower stamen, and its dense number of feet, it was clearly the demonic centipede that appeared only in deserts, a creature whose entire body was covered in lethal poison, and the venomous fluid it spits out from its mouth was the most poisonous among poisons. But the demonic centipede usually resides deep underground in the deserts. How did it come to be hidden within a boulder, and had followed them for such a long distance? The fear still lingering, she would not be able to decipher the reason for that no matter how smart she was. Before her, she saw that Qingbei was lying there on the ground with his eyes tightly shut, already fallen unconscious. She could only temporarily seal his meridians with her golden needles to stop his blood from circulating, to prevent the venom from spreading over a large area. She turned around to discover that the demonic centipede was initiating an attack upon Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu. Fortunately, although the two sisters did not possess very high levels of cultivation, they were quite adept at running away. Though they were screaming their heads off from terror, the demonic centipede was not able to catch them at that moment, its long body dragging its speed down by quite a bit. Qing Yu's brows knitted up. She had been just beside that creature just now, but it had seemed like the creature did not see her at all, but had gone to attack the other two people instead of striking at her. Why? A soft snigger suddenly sounded beside her. Zhang Mai had suddenly appeared out of the blue, his long gold and silver eyes highly dazzling. He then winked at her and said, "Mistress, not only will that fella not attack you, but even if you stand right in front of it, you will still be safe and sound." "Why? Here, watch." Zhang Mai smiled mischievously before his gold and silver figure shot at the speed of light to suddenly appear right in front of the demonic centipede that was relentlessly pursuing the two young ladies, standing there without moving an inch, his hands behind his back. Qing Yu's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared, when she saw the demonic centipede actually went around the golden-haired youth, before continuing to pursue the two girls. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, how did that happen? Qing Yu was a little stunned as she looked at the youth who had come running back. Did you turn yourself invisible just now? Under most circumstances, in order to avoid trouble, whenever Zhang Mai came out to move around, Qing Yu would ask him to make himself invisible and must not appear before people. It was when he did not conceal himself that others would then be able to see him. I did not. The youth opened his palms before him in innocence. Then you released your aura to threaten it? Definitely not. Zhang Mai pouted defensively as he looked at her. My foolish mistress, you're usually very smart. Why have you suddenly dumbed down today? Chapter 97. 2. Demonic Centipede. That fella doesn't have eyes or a nose, so it obviously can't see or smell to detect an enemy. But as its body is closely stuck to the ground, it is able to accurately locate the enemy through any movement on the ground. As you had not moved earlier, it was completely unaware of your presence, and when I suddenly appeared in its path earlier, it just went around me as it had thought that I was a boulder. Boulder? After Zhang Mai's explanation, Qing Yu finally understood why it had thought the golden-haired youth was a boulder. The environment here is strange and queer, and one cannot just use their eyes to see the place. All the rocks and boulders here had suddenly come out from underground, and that was why it had thought that I was a boulder that just shot out from underground. So I see. Qing Yu nodded. and she then ravaged the youth's head violently with her hand. Not too shabby, little burro. You're almost a walking encyclopedia. To think that you know this as well. You're truly your mistress' personal security blanket. Having his head ruffled so suddenly in a way that could almost be termed as lovingly, and being praised so highly, a red flush unconsciously tinted Zhang Mai's cheeks. That I am able to be of assistance to my mistress. Little burro is very happy. After a moment of bashfulness, the youth then opened his mouth to say in a serious tone, Mistress, you'll still have to be careful. Although that fellow is stupid, it is still a peak 7th level spirit beast that is about to advance into the 8th level. You must kill it before it advances, or it will become more powerful when it reaches the 8th level. Peak 7th level spirit beast. Do they really have to be that lucky? Qingyu cast a worried look at the youth on the ground. She has to deal with it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, leaving her foolish younger brother in that condition could become very dangerous. She really regrets not bringing Little Snow along this time, as Little Snow would only need to suck out all the poison, and he'll be fine. Little burro, watch Little Bay for me. I fear that there might be other creatures nearby. Qingyu stood up after giving her order. Watching the two girls who were almost going to collapse from running, she then said in a voice that was not very loud, but was penetrating enough to reach their ears. Go hide behind that boulder to the side in front of you. Just stand there and do not move another inch. When Yan Shiro heard that, she screamed back in disbelief. Do you think we're stupid? Are we really supposed to stand there to await our deaths? If you do not wish to die, then do as I say. Qingyu said indifferently. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU in comparison, Yan Shiwu was smarter than her sister. When she heard Qingyu's words, she instinctively obeyed and hid herself behind the boulder, standing still and not daring to move a single muscle. Seeing that, Yan Shiro had no choice but to follow suit. Immediately, the vast and expansive flats fell silent. The demonic centipede that was speeding forward suddenly halted, the stamen-like mouth quivering slightly at the tip. It seemed to be rather puzzled why its two prey had suddenly disappeared, and its body that was tens of meters long writhed and twisted around in fury, becoming rather confused. It suddenly stopped its furious thrashing and turned its body towards a particular direction. There seemed to be some movement coming from there. At that moment, Qingyu's was approaching step by step with almost no sound coming out from under her feet. But as her footsteps were too light, it made the creature start to doubt for a moment whether it was mistaken. Chapter 97. 3. Demonic centipede. Suddenly, those footsteps grew louder. In fact, it broke into a run. The demonic centipede perked up immediately, and its body that had been stretched out flat on the ground suddenly came upright, lashing out a ferocious attack towards the source of the sound, but then crashed into an incredibly hard boulder instead. It became dizzy immediately, and it was a while before it regained its senses. Where's the enemy? The movements had clearly been coming from this direction. Why had it suddenly disappeared? The speed of the demonic centipede's attack was too fast to dodge, and Qingyu had already leapt up to stand on one foot atop a high boulder, her arms held wide open, standing steadily. That creature had foolishly crashed into the boulder as expected, and though Qingyu was at right above its head at that moment, the creature was completely unaware of it. Since it did not have any eyes or a nose, it could only stick its body close to the ground to feel the enemy's movement to locate them. It waited for a moment to ascertain that there was no other movements before it clumsily slithered away. However, it was right in that instant that Qingyu's body suddenly shifted, and the foot she held suspended in the air was lowered as she jumped hard upon the boulder once. This time, the demonic centipede was smarter, and it did not go charging headlong towards the sound anymore, but decided to spit out a large mouthful of poison instead. Qingyu immediately leapt onto another boulder, and the surface of the poison-covered boulder immediately started to bubble, actually softening as it melted down into a corrosive puddle. Qingyu was aghast. That's some damaging attack. It seemed to realize that it was being toyed by the opponent, and it became furiously enraged. That stamen-shaped like mouth began to spray venomous fluid all over the place, looking like it would not rest if it did not force its prey to show itself today. Damn it! If it continues to remain in such a berserk state, things might turn out ugly. A spirit beast's power was at its strongest when it went berserk, and it could possibly advance its level. The aura around Qing Yu's body suddenly congealed, and she leapt up into the air. Her long upslanted eyes flashed with a dark glint, and they turned completely jet black, where not a single speck of white could be seen in those eyes, looking incredibly strange. Sacred burial arts ravaging rot. With those few soft words that came out from her mouth, the ground suddenly lurched, and the entire place seemed to be rocking violently. Countless thick and strong black vines then burrowed out from underground, every inch covered with sharp hooked barbs, the tips of the vines waving like wildly tentacles of an octopus. They were clearly so soft and flexible, but they continued to grow incessantly, every single vine like a sharp blade that left countless wounds on the body of the demonic centipede. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What was most precious to the demonic centipede was the blood that ran inside its body, which was more greatly prized than the venom that it spat out through its mouth. If that venom was cultivated into poison, it would definitely qualify to be placed among the top 10 on the poison charts. But when it bled, with the loss of blood, its attack also becomes weaker. The thick vines continued to grow maniacally, increasing endlessly in number, till it finally formed into a circular prison that fully surrounded the demonic centipede, trapping it as they coiled around its body and gradually tightened, which sped up the rate of its bleeding. Trapped inside, the demonic centipede let out highly agonized cries, its stamen-shaped mouth spitting out venomous fluid in an attempt to corrode the vines off it. But any vine that was corroded away was quickly replaced by the never-ending growth of more vines, which did not help its predicament at all, but merely weaken itself further. It might be because of its perilous situation that it came to ignite its survival instincts further. It continued to struggle and writhe, and the venom from its mouth was suddenly like a dam that had been opened, spurting out like a torrent, which pushed the vines back over a large area. Its body then suddenly expanded in size by a full round in an instant, and that small stamen-like mouth suddenly turned into gaping jaws that was filled with teeth sharp as saws. The eyes of the golden-haired youth from further away turned sharp. Good grief! It has risen a level. Chapter 98. 1. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. The birth of a level 8 spirit beast caused the entire Hades Canyon to quake. The raging roar of wild torrential energy, surging out in waves, that caused other spirit beasts in the surrounding area to shiver as they cowered in their corners, not daring to come out. It was pushing all the other spirit beasts into hopelessness. The recent birth of a heaven-defying super-divine beast had already frightened them almost to death, and they had not dared to come out to roam and search for food even when their stomachs growled in hunger, thinking being able to survive another day was one day earned, deeply afraid that they'll encounter the lordly beast. And now another high-leveled spirit beast had appeared. Looks like they should be making plans to leave this place of calamity, or they might find themselves dead, without even knowing how they had lost their lives. And on the other end of the Hades Canyon, the two people, Lu Junyao and Bai Jiyan, who heard the commotion paused in their steps. That was the aura of an 8th level spirit beast. Lu Junyao said as he gazed far into the distance. And it is a variation of a mutant spirit beast, its abilities surpassing that of regular 8th level spirit beasts. Bai Jiyan shook his head and said, logically, such an unconventional place should not appear in these low-level lands, and the levels of the spirit beasts in here are relatively high, almost reaching the levels of the ones in the middle-level lands. Lu Junyao lowered his eyes in thought, and then said slowly, the existence of this place by itself is already illogical, and now the Hades Canyon has sunk deep underground, so it will not show up in the world anymore. Upon saying that, he then glanced darkly at Bai Jiyan. The most urgent task at hand now is to find that little pet of yours first. If it doesn't know what's good for itself, and comes to hurt that lass, I will not care what your intentions are with the beast. I will make sure it loses a few layers of its skin. A corner of Bai Jiyan's mouth twitched. Do you have to be so vicious? Moreover, I feel that the lass isn't someone that is so easily disadvantaged, you know? Qingyu was pushed back to one side by the great blast of energy from the creature's level advancement, and saw that the fella's body had grown explosively by a few sizes. Its mouth that had originally looked rather clumsy, now become incredibly malevolent. No matter how aggressive the black vines were at that moment, they were no longer able to hold down the creature, who had advanced into its next level, and they all began to retreat, burrowing back underground. Mistress! Zhang Mai was a little worried when he saw that, and he had moved to come beside the young lady to say earnestly, "Use me." Ever since we came to this strange world, we have never once stood together in battle before. Qingyu cast him a brief glance. Go back and help me keep watch over little Bei. Don't come mess things up. But you'll get hurt. So what? Qingyu's demeanor was indifferent. Only when one constantly gets hurts and bleeds will one's strength come to be elevated even higher. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The young lady's beautiful and alluring eyes then turned red and gold, and the aura over her body suddenly underwent a change in that instant, a change that caused Zhang Mai to tremble despite himself, the expression on his face becoming rather excited. Just a mere 8th level spirit beast is not even worth my attention at all. Today is its first day becoming a high-level spirit beast, and it will also be its last. The figure that was clearly so thin and frail was suddenly exuding an aura that felt like one from a king who gazes upon the world with contempt. Zhang Mai's gaze grew profound and deep. This was his mistress' true self, haughty and noble, the only master that was able to inherit the sacred burial arts. Even though she was starting all over again from scratch, and her powers were not as strong as before, she still possessed that same powerful and tenacious soul deep down inside. Although the transformed demonic centipede still did not have any eyes or ears, its senses were now more than 100 times stronger, seeming like it did not need to depend on movements for it to determine the direction its prey was in. The boulder that hid Yin Shiro and Yin Shiwu was then summarily corroded cleanly away by a mouthful of venom from the demonic centipede's mouth. And if they had not gotten away in time, their bodies would have completely rotted away together. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.